Hi, welcome or welcome back to another Gavin Gets Goosebumps reading vlog. I just thought of that title for the series. I do call them the Goosebumps Postmortems, but I kind of like Gavin Gets Goosebumps. Because yeah, this is my 6th reading vlog now for the Goosebumps series written by R.L. Stine. It's been 3 years since my very first Goosebumps vlog, and my task was to read all of the Goosebumps books from beginning to end, all the while trying to catch the attention of Mr. R.L. Stine himself, who I have with me as a very special guest today. Hi, Mr. Stine. Hello, I'm R.L. Stine. I write the Goosebumps books. I'm being held here against my will. Gavin reads it all has kidnapped me. No, this is an opportunity is what this is. You didn't appear in my previous Goosebumps video. You declined. So I'm making up for that in this video, aren't we? Yeah. So after all, I am R.L. Stine's favourite booktuber. What was that? And there are still some spin-off series left for me to tackle. So I've done all of the main series, at least the ones that are complete. So I've done the original Goosebumps, Series 2000, Horrorland and Hall of Horrors, the Most Wanted series, and the Slappy World series. I do have a playlist down below if you want to watch all of my Goosebumps videos. Be sure to check them out. Mr. Stine, which one's your favourite? Well, how could I choose a favourite? They're all there. Good answer, good answer. And so in today's video, I will be tackling one of the spin-off series of Goosebumps called Tales to Give You Goosebumps. Now, the Tales to Give You Goosebumps are a set of 6 short story collections. They are filled with 10 spooky stories each, and I'm going to be reading all of them for the very first time. I'd never read these before. These came out in the 90s, so during the peak Goosebumps era. Now, I'm very excited to go back to reading the books that Mr. Stine wrote during the 90s, because those were the best Goosebumps books, in my opinion. The modern day Goosebumps books, I'm sorry to say this, Mr. Stine, but they're a little bit... I mean, don't get me wrong, you do have a good one every now and then, but it ain't good enough. So I'm going to be reading all of the short stories for the very first time. So that will be 60 short stories I'll be reading in 6 books. So we have Tales to Give You Goosebumps, more Tales to Give You Goosebumps, even more Tales to Give You Goosebumps, still more Tales to Give You Goosebumps, more and more Tales to Give You Goosebumps, and finally more and more and more Tales to Give You Goosebumps. So I will most likely rate every story out of 10 as well to give you an overall average for each of the books in the series. Even though I've never read any of these stories, I do think some of them were adapted in the 90s Goosebumps TV show, and I might have seen some of the episodes that were based off of some of these short stories, so that'll be very interesting. I do seem to remember one of them. I think the TV show episode was called The Haunted House Game. I seem to remember that episode, and I think it was based off one of these stories, so very excited to get to that. Like all my previous Goosebumps videos, this will be filled with spoilers. I'll be talking about every single short story. I'll be going through everything that happens in them. I'll be giving you my complete and honest thoughts, even if you disagree with them. That's absolutely fine. Do let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, but please keep it respectful. I'm still dealing with comments from my Goosebumps videos from like 3 years ago, you know what I mean? Like, good. But just know that even if I am critical of Goosebumps, I love it with all of my heart. I love R.L. Stine. Yes, I love you. I love you so much. This man got me into reading, okay? So I do love Goosebumps, even if I do come across as quite negative. I still owe R.L. Stine my life. So please do give this video a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's read some more Goosebumps. Isn't that right, R.L. Stine? If you like the video, Gavin might let me go. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know what it is about 90s Goosebumps stories, but they just really make you feel a certain kind of way, you know? Almost like a comfort. Like, this really transported me back to my childhood, even though I didn't read the Tales to Give You Goosebumps when I was a kid. But reading them now as an adult, I don't know, I just felt myself really falling back into being a 90s kid. So there are 10 stories in this one, and there are some really, really good ones. Like, the very first one, The House of No Return, I ended up giving a 9 out of 10 because I thought it was so well done. It's probably one of the most well-described R.L. Stine books I've read, because it starts off with like really great description of a house, an abandoned house that's rumored to be haunted, and we have this little group of kids who have this club and they want to try and get members for their club, but there's only the 3 of them and like nobody else is really brave enough to join. Well, brave enough by their standards. These little kids are little shits, I'm not gonna lie. They want to test people's bravery by making them spend a whole hour in, what's it called, Willow Hill? Yeah, the house on Willow Hill, and yet these kids have never been inside themselves. They were just, oh, we're already brave, like we don't need to prove ourselves, but like you have to do it to be part of our club. And even the guy, I think it was called Chris, and there were so many names to remember, I'm so sorry. I've just read 10 short stories back to back. Yeah, Chris. They force Chris into the house to spend there for an hour, even though Chris is like, I really don't want to go in. He doesn't want to be part of this club, but they're like, no, like, you're doing this because we want you part of the club. And I'm like, what even is this club? Seriously. So the three characters, there's Robbie, Laurie, and Nathan. They force Chris, who is still like newish, like he has been there for a year, but he doesn't really know anyone. And they literally grab him as they are trick-or-treating and force him into that house. And they close the door and they're like, right, we're going to wait outside for you at the bottom of the path, spend an hour in there, and then after the hour's up, come out and you're part of the club. Even though Chris is like, I don't want to be part of your club. Like, what you talking about? Like, don't make me do this. And it's so weird because like these kids, they literally do like pick Chris up and they throw him inside that house. And he's begging and pleading, no, please don't do this, don't do this. And they do it anyway. Like, do they really expect him to come out the house and be like, okay, great, now I'm part of your club? Like, honestly, these kids are ridiculous. But, like, I'm not holding it against them because they are just kids. But the descriptions of it, it's set during Halloween, so there is trick-or-treating. And it just feels very atmospheric. It feels very, very great. Like, an actually well-written R.L. Stine book. And I love the fact that we have these short stories because a lot of the problems with R.L. Stine, for me, is that they just go on too long. And R.L. Stine has to, you know, have so many cop-outs. And he has to end every chapter on a fake cliffhanger. When you have a short story of, like, 15 pages, there are no 4 cliffhangers, really. They are straight at the point. They just get to the heart of the story and there's not really a whole lot of beating around the bush. So I love that we got straight into the story, very well described. And then I kind of love the ending as well. So Chris has been in there for well over an hour and the other kids are standing outside like, where is he? Like, he's done the challenge, like he's been in there for over an hour, like where is he? He should come out by now. So the 3 kids end up going inside the house themselves. They are greeted by a ghost of a man and a woman, and the man and the woman are like, oh, Chris left an hour ago, but in order for him to leave, he exchanged you 3. He knew you 3 were going to come into the house, so before he left he said, please let me go, and if you do, there will be 3 people who will come in and you can take them instead. And so now the 2 ghosts have the 3 main characters of the story, the ones who forced Chris in there in the first place. I was like, that's a brilliant ending. That was such a good ending. It's instant karma for them for doing that to Chris, and it's just so grim, it's so bizarre, and so I loved it. A 9 out of 10 for that one. And I believe it was adapted into a TV show episode. I think The House of No Return, Teacher's Pet, Strain Pays, and Click, I think were all adapted, and I haven't seen any of those TV show episodes. But talking about Teacher's Pet I gave a 6 out of 10. It was about a couple of kids in this class where this teacher is obsessed with snakes and he's like forcing these kids to learn about snakes every single day, and he's got all of these snakes in the class as well, and he's feeding them like live mice in front of them. And the main character, she wants to free all of the mice, so she breaks in one night with her friend and they find a cobra that was never there before, and it turns out that cobra is the teacher. And the teacher is like, in order for you to get away with this, like so that nobody knows that you broke in, you have to like feed me every day now from the rest of your life. I kind of like the last line. It's like, here you go, Mr. Blankenship, open wide. And I don't know why, but like that kind of is a bit of a funny ending, but also quite terrifying too, knowing that your teacher is like this massive snake and you have to now feed it. They were trying to like save the mice, which I found so admirable for these main characters, and it was like kind of interesting to follow. It was a bit weird that a teacher would have so many snakes in the classroom. I don't think that would have been allowed. I don't think any school in any district ever would allow that many snakes, because like they're literally everywhere. At one point a student accidentally knocks one of the container things over and a mice gets out. So the fact that there's that many, that a student is knocking into the glass and like accidentally letting mice escape, that's way too many. That can't be right. That can't be passing protocol. Come on. But other than that, I did find the main character sneaking into the school at night rather scary, and yeah, I thought it was a good little story. Strained Peas, I think I might get blasted for this one. I did try and look up to see if I could find some reviews of this online, and I think Strained Peas, a lot of people end up loving. For me, I found it really ridiculous. It was so weird. At the same time, I loved the ending. I thought it had a great ending, which is kind of rare for a Goosebumps book as well. So the fact that we had so many short stories in this collection have great endings really does surprise me. But yeah, we have a main character called Nicholas, and his baby sister, Hannah, has just been born and she's brought to the house for the first time. He meets Hannah for the first time, and she has a birthmark on her face, so he thinks that she is evil because he's been reading comic books and one of the characters in the comic books has a birthmark on his face and it's called the Mark of Evil. So he assumes that this baby is evil. So yeah, essentially it's just a full-ass short story of Nicholas thinking this baby is evil. And so like the baby is sick on him, the baby's crying for the majority of it. It's just like okay, like there's nothing really scary about that at all, and I prefer the scarier Goosebumps. You will see in all of my ratings, even for the Goosebumps in my previous videos, I will always rate higher the Goosebumps books I find scary, more so than funny. This one did have an ending that did make me laugh though. So it turns out that Hannah wasn't actually their child anyway. The mother gets a phone call and the doctor tells her that the babies were accidentally switched at birth and her actual baby needs to be like picked up and she needs to take that baby back and stuff. So a bit of a weird situation, but then they do bring the actual baby home who is supposed to be theirs, and Nicholas is tickling this baby because he's like, oh, this baby's good, like this baby's a nice baby. And so he's tickling this baby and the baby laughs and then he tries it again and the baby's like, if you tickle me again, I will end you, kind of thing, you know what I mean? If you tickle me again, kid, I'll rip your arm off. Like, I don't know why, but I just found it so funny. I had in my head the baby's voice coming out, and it's like a really gruff, deep male voice, even though this is a young girl called Grace, like a tiny baby, a baby that's just been born called Grace, and I just find that so funny. And one of the reasons why I don't really like this story all that much, because I gave it 3 out of 10, is like we do have like this tiny little baby, like Hannah, the baby before, it's like kind of crawling with scissors, and it does look like she's about to hurt Nicholas, and there's just some like really strange things that really just shouldn't happen or be able to happen, especially if Grace was actually the monster baby and not Hannah. So it's like, well, which is it, R.L. Stine, which is it? So yeah, I only gave that one 3 out of 10, but I know that's kind of a lot of people's favourite from this collection. I'm like, but the majority of it is just about baby. Like, the baby is just doing baby things, and Nicholas has just like got an overactive imagination about it. So yeah, I don't know, I found that one a bit strange. Strangers in the Woods was an interesting one. I'm giving that one 4 out of 10. It follows Lucy, who goes to stay with her great aunt Abigail in Fairview, and Abigail lives in like a sort of like farm area. She lives in this like house and there's like woods all around, and Lucy goes there and she realizes that Abigail isn't acting quite right. The food she makes doesn't quite taste the same as it used to. She's telling her to stay out of the woods. Lucy brings her dog as well and the dog keeps barking, and then it turns out like randomly near the end of the story that there's actually a movie being filmed in the woods, and that's why she wasn't allowed in the woods. I don't know why Abigail didn't just tell her that. Like, she was like very mysterious about it all, like there's strange lights coming from the woods, and she's like, Lucy, don't go to the woods. And then Lucy's like, okay. Abigail could literally say, oh, don't go to the woods, there's a movie being filmed there, but she doesn't do that. So I don't know why, like, that's probably just me being an adult thinking things need to be explained like straight away, because it just leads to a whole bunch of miscommunication. But yeah, All the Strange Things does turn out to be just a movie happening in the woods, but in classic R.L. Stine fashion, there does have to be a little bit of a twist, and I do kind of like the twist. So I was hoping for a bit more of an alien story, and when it turned out that Aunt Abigail, like, the reason why things have been different was because she lost her glasses, so she can't really do the same things that she used to be able to do, because she can't read and she can't, you know, drive the car right. So when Lucy finds Abigail's glasses and goes to give her them back, she sees Abigail with these like tentacle arms, and then Abigail's like, oh, Lucy, you found my glasses, great. And so it does turn out that Aunt Abigail is an alien with like tentacles. So that is a cool little twist. I do wish we had more of that though, because I do really want a really good alien Goosebumps story. I know there were like Earth Geeks Must Go or something, or like there's other like little space-ish kind of Goosebumps books, but I don't know if we've had like a genuine alien horror Goosebumps that I've enjoyed. So Invasion of the Body Snatchers as well is kind of like another one. No, Body Squeezers from Series 2000, but like none that I've like fully loved. So I would love that. So it was a little bit of a missed opportunity. So 4 out of 10 for that one. Good Friends was interesting. It's not scary. It's not scary, and like, I guess the ending twist did kind of get me a little bit. So this one we follow Jordan, and he has a best friend called Dylan. He has a sister called Ashley, and an older brother called Richard. And Ashley's being teased by Jordan and Dylan for having an imaginary friend. And I thought, oh, okay, like this imaginary friend thing could be quite scary, and it could lead to some really scary moments. But like literally nothing happens in this story. It's just a whole lot of Jordan and Dylan teasing Ashley, and then they decide that they're going to go into Richard's bedroom and get his tarantulas and scare Ashley with it. But when they do that, we get Richard coming up to Jordan being like, you need to stop having imaginary friends because Dylan and Ashley don't exist. And yet this entire story we thought Ashley was the one with the imaginary friend, but as it turns out Ashley is the imaginary friend. So like that is kind of interesting and kind of cool, but nothing happens this entire story really. Like there's nothing scary happening. It's just 2 kids wanting to pull a prank on Ashley, but then it turns out Ashley and Dylan don't exist. They're just imaginary friends. So like, okay, but why? And you know, what's the point? Like, how is that scary? You know what I mean? So yeah, it literally ends with, forget about Jordan and Ashley, okay, they don't exist, they're just in your mind imaginary friends off of babies. So I'm like, okay, but this entire story was just like a whole bunch of nothing, really. So what did I give it again? I gave it a 4 out of 10. I probably could have lowered that with 3 because, you know, it's not my favourite. But I do kind of like the fact that throughout the entire thing, I didn't know that there was that twist gonna happen. So Arvelstein did get me with that one. So I'll give him that. I'll give him the 4 out of 10 for that one. Okay, how I won my bat, I gave it 3 out of 10. That one was another one that was like, you know what I mean? It's like, again, not really scary. So we have a guy who loves baseball and he's part of a baseball team. He's called Michael Burns. And he used to be pretty good, and then he starts being really bad out of nowhere. And he starts like letting the team down and stuff. And then one day this weird little man called Mr. Smith comes up to Michael and gives him a bat. He's like, this is a bat that you can have, but you have to make sure you give it back to me at the museum after you've used it. Like, after the game, come straight to the museum, don't do anything else, come straight back to the museum, give me the bat back, it's going to help you. So Michael uses it, and yeah, he's like incredible with it. He hits so many home runs, and he doesn't want to give this bat up. So he goes back to the museum, and he says to Mr. Smith, I want to keep this bat forever. Like, I don't want to give you it back. I want to keep it. And Mr. Smith is like, oh, okay, then you can keep it then forever. And Michael's like, really? And Mr. Smith is like, yeah, just like strike a pose, like, you know, do the whole baseball pose. So Michael does that. There's a flash. And then it turns out that Mr. Smith has frozen Michael solid, and he's been that way ever since. All because Michael asked if he could keep the bat. And I'm like, okay, okay. That is essentially the story. That is just all of the story right there. So I did give it 3 out of 10 because there's just like nothing else really going for it. I mean, yes, it's kind of scary that there was a man who has frozen this child solid, and, you know, he's still frozen by the end of the story, and he's saying, oh, I've been frozen for so long. But people visit him and they're like, oh my god, he looks so real. So like when this child goes missing in this town, I mean, does no one connect the dots? like Shady can't be like frozen like that forever unless like he's changed his look dramatically. Because as soon as that little boy goes missing, you know the authorities are calling. But again, that's me being an adult, and I need to stop being an adult when I'm reading Goosebumps. I need to just like let my 90s kid self just like read this and enjoy it. And like, it was fine. It was fine. Just the whole baseball storyline just really didn't get me. Next we have Mr. Teddy. I gave this one a 3 out of 10 as well. I thought the twist at the end was interesting too, but it follows a young girl who gets everything she wants, essentially. Her name is Willa. She collects a lot of teddies and dolls and porcelain eggs, apparently. In Willa, she wants Mr. Teddy, so she gets Mr. Teddy, and she thinks her sister is playing pranks on her because it seems like Mr. Teddy is in different places every time Willa wakes up, even though Willa sleeps with him. And she got rid of her old Teddy. Well, not got rid of, but like she put him away, and she's like, okay, I don't really want to like sleep with you anymore. I want to sleep with Mr. Teddy. So yeah, we have Mr. Teddy, who's replaced the old Teddy. And yeah, all of these strange things happen. Her room gets trashed and everything. Willa blames her sister, but it obviously isn't her sister. And then she ends up ripping up Mr. Teddy and like takes his head off, throws him out the window, and then she gets her old Teddy, the only thing that wasn't damaged in the whole ransacking of her room, and it turns out it was actually the old Teddy who had done all of this and was like, you're never going to replace me again. It's me and you for life, which I did like. I did like it. That's why I gave it a 3 out of 10. Because otherwise I probably would have given it a 1 out of 10 because I just didn't really care for the story. But I gave it 3 out of 10 because I thought it was a really good ending. Yeah, it turned out to be revenge. Revenge for being replaced. Who knew? The next story is called Click, and I gave it an 8 out of 10. I thought it was actually really, really good. I've heard this kind of story before though, and I'm pretty sure there's an Adam Sandler movie with like the same kind of premise. But there is a young boy called Seth, and he gets a universal remote from his dad. And this universal remote, he is able to point it at someone and something happens to them. So like his mum comes in, he presses mute, and she keeps talking but he can't hear her, and he can like rewind things as well, so he gets like chocolate pudding 4 times and stuff. So he ends up taking it to school where he is doing a test and stuff. He uses it to like cheat on the test, and then things start going a bit awry. He mutes someone, but when he clicks mute again, they won't unmute, and then he clicks freeze frame and that person gets frozen and he can't unfreeze them. And then things get a little bit hectic as people realize like, oh my god, Seth is doing that, like Seth's just frozen the principal. And then Seth is like trying to like stop people, but he can't unfreeze them, so he's causing damage. And then he suddenly presses power off, and then the whole world goes black. And that is terrifying. That's one of the reasons why I gave this an 8 out of 10 and like why it's like such a high rating. That is kind of terrifying. Like the batteries died, and so like what will he do now? Will he be able to find batteries? Like has the whole world gone black? Like has he just turned the world off? You know what I mean? It's like so interesting that like this is the kind of story that I think could have been done with having a full book. Like the same with The House of No Return. I'm loving the short stories where I'm left with wanting more, especially since, you know, R.L. Stine's books do leave me thinking, gosh, I wish there was less. So it's really cool that we have these stories every now and then where I'm like, oh yeah, this would make it a really great full-length Goosebumps book. So I really enjoyed that one. I don't think R.L. Stine created the concept of it. I'm sure there was like another story before Click, but I digress. The next story is Broken Dolls. This one was a little bit of a missed opportunity. I still kind of liked it, so I gave it a 5 out of 10. This one follows Tamara, and she has a younger brother called Neil. They go to this like fair, and Tamara loves dolls, and she sees this like doll stand, and there's like this weird woman. She is running the stand, and she puts her hand on Neil's head, and then he starts to act like a little bit sick, like he comes down with a fever. And so Tamara goes to that woman's trailer and finds this like doll with a blank face, but as she's looking at it, the face of her brother is like coming through on it, which is terrifying. One of the reasons why I gave it a 5 out of 10 was because that was a really great visual. And yeah, there's like a jar of goop, like doll goop, and Tamara throws it into a pool, and that kind of gets rid of the woman. And then Neil gets back to normal. I think the dolls that the woman had beforehand used to be real people as well, so like they are cheering and stuff. So a little bit later on, Tamara gets a package, and it turns out to be a doll of the doll maker person, and so Tamara's like, Neil, break this. And so like that was a little bit underwhelming. I love the idea of the dolls and, you know, having real people come through like the doll thing, because I thought that as soon as Neil was touched that he would then begin turning into a doll, but it was actually kind of like a different sort of spin on that. So I like that. It was good. Just a really underwhelming ending, whereas most of the other short stories I thought have had great endings. And then the final story in this book is A Vampire in the Neighborhood, and I liked it. I did. I gave it a 6 out of 10, even though I think we've had this kind of premise in another Goosebumps book before. So we have a group of kids. They come across Helga, who is the new girl in school, and they think that she is a vampire, so they stalk her essentially. Like they stay outside of her house, they watch her, and it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit odd. But the twist of the story is that the kids that are watching Helga, who think she's a vampire, they turn out to be vampires themselves. So they say to Helga, are you a vampire? And Helga says, yeah, I am. And then they're like, okay, show us your fangs. And Helga's like, you show me your fangs. So then they do show her their fangs. And Helga's like, whoa, I was kidding. I'm not actually a vampire. So the kids are like, okay, well, we're going to have to like make her one. So the story ends with them making Helga into a vampire, which I think is terrifying. Like that's so scary. The fact that they're like literally murdering this child to make her a vampire to be like them, even after they just stalked her the entire time. But I do think the whole main character turns out to be the monster at the end thing has been done to death with the main Goosebumps books. So that wasn't really too shocking, but I still like the pacing of the story. I thought it was pretty good. And so yeah, not a terrible story at all, which does mean that the average rating for the very first Tales to Give You Goosebumps book is a 5.1 out of 10, which that isn't too bad. It isn't too bad. I will say the two standout stories, The House of No Return and Click, are two like iconic stories when I like think about them more. So I do think that this is a fantastic start to the Tales to Give You Goosebumps spin-off series. More Tales to Give You Goosebumps gave me less tales that I fully loved. I think there was only one story in this one that I would consider like pretty great, and that's the second story. So the first story is The Werewolf's First Night, and considering we just had the vampire story in the previous book, like that was the previous story I read before getting to this one, it has the exact same kind of twist where the main character turns out to be the monster. And a few stories in this were revolving around camping or like going somewhere. I kind of like it when one of these books has a theme. So while not all of them were camping, all of the stories were set during summer, which I kind of like that. Like R.L. Stine doing a themed book is pretty great. So The Werewolf's First Night, I'm only going to give it 2 out of 10. Like it was so obvious and it was so boring as well. We have Brian, who is being dropped off at Thunder Lake, which is like a camp for kids, and as well as parents as well. Like the parents can go off and do their little bits and bobs while the kids do their things at camp, and they do like stay in the same cabin and stuff, so like that's a little bit different. And Brian is terrified of werewolves, and the boys around him seem to be turning into werewolves, or at least that's what he's thinking is happening. But the twist is during an overnight when, you know, Brian gets taken away from his parents and he is with all of these other kids in camping tents. It is a full moon and the other kids start turning into werewolves. However, it turns out to just be a prank, like that's just a joke. They aren't actually turning into werewolves, it's just kind of like an initiation for like the new kid at camp. But then it turns out that Brian is actually the werewolf. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense by the end of it. It just seemed like one of those throw this in last minute kind of twists because of just how terrified Brian is. And then he kind of just has a complete 180 at the end. I guess Thunder Lake is going to be fun after all, I told myself. It's just like such a 180 of his character that I could have forgiven the twist that, you know, the main character is actually the monster at the end. Again, I could have forgiven that had the character not like had that really lazy character arc and character development. I know you're gonna say though it's only like a 13-page short story, so like I need to lighten up, but I still feel like it could have been a bit better written. So let's go into one that I do kind of like. I gave this next one a 7 out of 10, and this one is called P.S. Don't Write Back. It was so filled with intrigue. Like I actually didn't know what was going on during the entire thing, and there are still some things left open-ended by the end too, which I didn't hate. Actually, I thought it just added to the mystery. But we have another camp called Camp Timberlake Hills, and this follows Dave, and he hasn't received a letter from home, and he's like, why haven't my parents sent me a letter? Like, this is really strange. They always send me letters. Like, why aren't they writing to me? And then he finally does get one, which is so weird. It says, dear David, we're not coming up for visiting day. Your sister misses you. See you in August. Mom and Dad. P.S. Don't write back. And that's so fishy to him, because his sister doesn't miss him, and they always come for visiting day, so like, what's going on? And then he gets another one saying, dear David, we're sending you to live with your great uncle John. He's going to pick you up on the 27th. We think it's for the best. Mom and Dad, P.S. Don't write back. So again, it's just like, why? Like, what is going on here? And then he realizes that these letters must be for a different David who has his exact same name, but at the neighboring camp. So Camp Timberlane Hills, but he's at Camp Timberlake Hills. So he ends up like getting away from the camp, and he goes across the river to the camp that is on the other side. However, when he gets there, it's really, really weird. He comes across like a really scrawny guy who's like wearing dirty clothes, and he doesn't look like he has much energy, and he's like, oh, is there a David Stevenson here? And the kid points him to a cabin, so he finds the other David Stevenson. And here I'm thinking, oh, is this like some kind of like doppelganger thing? But as it turns out, actually, all the kids in this camp are dead, because years ago, the camp actually burned down to the ground with all the kids with it, which is so terrifying. Like, that's so dark for a Goosebumps book. And Dave does say around a campfire, hundreds of kids circling it, arms wrapped around each other, swaying back and forth, mourning. So he manages to escape. He gets back to his camp, and he asks Sam, who was like the camp counselor person. Sam says, we're the only camp on this lake. Well, there was once a camp across the lake, but it burned to the ground one summer 30 years ago. And then he says the letters, and the postmark says July 10th, 1964, which he didn't say before, and that's how it ends. Like, that felt like such a great kind of story to me. It almost like wrapped up with a nice bow at the end. Some great atmosphere with the other camp that had burned down, as well as it feeling like a genuine campfire story, like a horror story that you would share with someone around a campfire at the dead of night. Like, it's short, punchy, to the point. It has all the hallmarks of a really good campfire kind of story. So that's kind of what I like about it. It kind of reminded me of Are You Afraid of the Dark a little bit. Definitely my favourite one of this collection. Then we have Something Fishy. Now, I ended up giving this one 5 out of 10. Even though I think it's a little bit of a ridiculous storyline, I do kind of find it entertaining. So we follow Eric, and he has this fish tank, and when he puts his finger in the water and he does this like weird kind of finger movement, he ends up getting transported into the water. Like, he becomes tiny in the fish tank, and he has fun to begin with, like, oh my god, like, this is so awesome, I gotta go swimming because I'm like trapped home all summer. And he starts to realize that his pet fish are much bigger than him, and I can only imagine how terrifying that could actually be, you know, being in a fish tank and having like this massive goldfish above you. Like, it could swallow you at any moment, you know what I mean? And they do kind of start attacking him. And there was actually a really scary moment when his mum comes in, sees a dead fish, and his mum has this like fish net thing, and she gets the dead fish out, which also has Eric in it, and it looks like she's about to put it down the toilet. So she's about to flush her son down the toilet, which honestly was so scary. But he did end up becoming life-size again. Turns out that if he gets dry, he becomes back to normal. So he tries it again. He's like, okay, I kind of know what I need to do, so I'm going to test this out again because he found it so fun. So he has this like wall, he builds this wall in the fish tank, one side with all the goldfish, the other side for him, so like he doesn't have to encounter the danger again. So he goes inside it again. However, at that moment, his mum comes in. He's like, oh, where is Eric? Where is Eric? I've just bought him a surprise. And it turns out the surprise is 2 new fish to add to the fish tank, and she puts it in the side that Eric is on. And these are Siamese fighting fish, the meanest fish on earth. Look at them snap their teeth. Won't Eric be surprised? And she doesn't know herself that her son is literally on that side of the tank, and she's just put 2 killer fish in that side. 1, why would you buy your child killer fish to begin with? Like, why would you buy them the meanest fish on earth? Why? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. That's dangerous. Two, like, the timing is perfect. So I gave it a 5 out of 10 because I just found that so entertaining and so funny in a way. But also, like, the implications of that are just absolutely terrifying. Okay, the next one is called You've Gotta Believe Me, which I gave a 2 out of 10. And I just finished this collection. I already kind of forgotten what this one's about. Like, that's how boring this one is. Oh, yeah, so it's about a guy. He's called Stanley. He has this telescope and he keeps seeing these, like, flying saucers. He goes to a cornfield where he spotted these flying saucers, and he actually ends up getting kidnapped by some aliens. They had giant mashed-in heads with big glittery eyes. They had tentacles all over their heads where their hair should be. They walked on 6 legs, 2 arms grew out of their backs, and instead of hands, they had giant claws. I was like, okay. And then he overhears these aliens say that they're at stage 3. They learned the English language from television. The television waves that the humans have sent out made it all the way to the aliens so that they could learn our language. And they've been waiting 10 long years. I love all of this exposition. I love it when a main character is overhearing the villains say their entire plan. Like, I love it when that happens. That was sarcasm, by the way. Yeah, they've been planning this for 10 long years, and they're going to put out a signal via television. That will be the last message, and it will finish them. So now Stanley is the only person who knows about it, so he wants to fight back against it. So he goes to a store, and he buys $134 worth of foil, of tin foil. However, he doesn't have money. The total came to $134.59. I didn't have enough money. My parents will come in tomorrow and pay you, I told him. And then the shop clerk just let him have it. Like, just like, okay, yeah, sure, why not? So he gets $130 worth of tinfoil. So out of everywhere on Earth, the saucer comes back to exactly his house. He has the foil on the reflector thing. I don't know. I don't know all these technical terms. But the aliens blast it, but the foil blasts it back at the aliens, and they leave. And then at the end, it's back. Look, the alien ship is back. You believe me, don't you? I don't care enough to believe you, honestly. I really don't care. It was just so boring. So boring. Then the next one is called Suckers, which I also gave 2 out of 10. This one felt a little bit like Monster Blood. A little bit. We have a group of kids on Black Island, and they find this chest. They open the chest up, and this green goop, this green gooey thing comes out, and it's got like suckers, and it's like attaching itself to the kids, and the only way to get it off is to give it gummy worms. So they feed it gummy worms, it goes off one of them, but it attaches themselves to another one, so they have to run to a store to buy more gummy worms. So they get 20 bags at the store. That will be Mr. Simpson started. Oh no, money, I didn't have any money. Mr. Simpson, please, I don't have any money. And I need these gummy worms, I explain frantically. It's a matter of life and death. They're for Greg. And then the clerk says, Greg, he's my best customer. Always buying gummy worms. Okay, go ahead. I'll charge it to your parents' bill. Whatever. Like, what is it with these kids getting away with like hundreds of dollars worth of stuff? Huh? Like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, that's just me being an adult nitpicking. They go back to the blob and they feed it gummy worms. They feed it gummy worms. They manage to get it back into the chest thing. A couple of bullies come by and they let the bullies open the chest. The end. That kind of reminds me a little bit of Say Cheese and Die. You know, with the camera and the main character in that one allowing the bullies to like find the camera. But like this was just like Monster Blood, and I hate Monster Blood so much. It's like my least favorite Goosebumps kind of story, and all it was is just green goo that they had to feed gummy worms. Probably one of the worst ones so far. Next one is Dr. Horror's House of Video. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 10. It wasn't too bad, but I wish we went a little bit further with it. We follow Ben, who loves horror movies. He comes across Dr. Horror's House of Video, and Dr. Horror has this garage where he films horror movies and stuff. So he goes to this kid. He's like, oh, do you want to be in one of my horror movies? And this is after Ben has like kind of broken into the store because you want to watch a horror movie. The sign says closed, but like Ben wanders in anyway. And Ben's just like, yeah, sure, let me ring my parents. So he rings his mum, and his mum's like, yeah, as long as you're home by dinner. Yeah, in this strange man's garage where there's like loads of horror movie villains and makeup and stuff. And Ben's there, and he's like, oh, here's the script, you need to be tied up, Ben. What happened to Stranger Danger? This man is saying, oh, we're going to tie you up for this scene, for this horror movie. We'll tie you up for your big scene. So they tie him up, and it turns out that the other monsters are in there and they're real. And Dr. Horror says, okay, monsters, now you're ready for the big eating scene. Roll them. The main character's stupidity kind of just made it like less enjoyable for me. And then the mothers stupidity as well. I will let my son film a movie with a stranger. Like, of course, like, makes total sense. So 4 out of 10 for that one. And then next we have The Cat's Tale. And I read this one majorly with Ash, my cat, grooming my hair. So I'm sorry if my hair's a little bit messy. But this one I gave a 3 out of 10. So we have Marla, and she ends up finding this black cat. And it kind of gave me a little bit of Cry of the Cat vibes. Who she calls Misty. She protects her from the storm. She wakes up one night with Misty like suffocating her. And so from that moment on, she thinks that this cat is trying to kill her. And it kind of does sound like this cat is. Every single time she tries to get rid of it, it comes back. A little bit like Slappy in the Living Dummy books. And there is this creepy rhyme that she hears every now and then. 9 lives, 9 lives, I will have thy body before I've lived my 9. Thy life is mine, and mine is thine. So Marla hears this, and then she starts to kind of like act a little bit cat-like. And then later when Misty dies, Misty ends up coming back and then says, 8 lives left, I will have thy body before I've lived my 9. Thy life is mine, and mine is thine. So it seems like Marla can't get rid of Misty at all. And eventually Misty will have Marla's body. I mean, which is kind of scary, but we've had this plotline before, so it wasn't overall an interesting read. And then we have Shell Shocker, which I give a 4 out of 10. This one follows Tara, and she loves seashells. She's on the beach, she picks up a seashell, and she hears, help me, inside it. And so this thing that's inside the shell is telling her to go to this cave. Again, like, the main character's stupidity just, like, absolutely wins out. So she goes to this cave because this voice in the shell tells her to. And when she gets to this cave, this massive crab thing is there, and then it turns out that there was a little crab inside the shell, and it kind of led the human to its kind of mother, or so it implies by the end. And I do love the fact that this story ends with Tara screamed and the giant claws snapped shut around her. It kind of indicates that she got killed at the end of the story, and that's horrifying, absolutely horrifying. Her going through this cave was quite horrifying as well. We had a lot of spiders on the wall. It was kind of nicely described, so that's why I've kind of given it a little bit of a higher rating. I mean, 4 out of 10 is still not amazing, but you know, it's something. The thing in the shell promised her, oh yeah, there's an even bigger shell in this cave. And yeah, there is a bigger shell in this cave, but it actually has this massive crab inside of it that's gonna eat you. So I kind of love the fact that she was led to her death the entire time. Like, that is messed up. And then we have Poison Ivy, which I gave a 2 out of 10. It's genuinely so boring. It's set in another camp called Camp Wilbur, and all it is Poison Ivy is growing. It's growing at a rapid rate, and the main character and his friends are like trapped in this bunker thing, and the Poison Ivy is like all over the place, and it's like trying to get in, and then they use one of the guys' aftershave to drive it away. And you know, they keep spraying it, and they drive it to the ocean, and then they get rid of it. So like, yay, we got rid of it. And then there's like this tornado of mosquitoes that come, and the guy who owns the aftershave, he's like, oh, I totally forgot, it attracts mosquitoes. So now they have this problem with the mosquitoes, but that's where it ends. So I kind of like that ending. It does still imply that danger is still imminent, but the entire thing is just about Poison Ivy growing. Again, it felt like Monster Blood. Like, I'm sick of these Monster Blood-esque stories, so I really didn't like it. I did like one point where there were 2 boys, Craig and Larry, who went to, you know, hack up the Poison Ivy and like stop it, and then R.L. Stine writes at the end of the paragraph, we never saw them again. That's kind of terrifying, and I kind of love that. The fact that they went missing after that and they were never seen again, great, but still a 2 out of 10. And then the final story in this book was The Spirit of the Harvest Moon, and I like the atmosphere of this one. I think it's quite creepy, so I gave this one a 5 out of 10. It is set at Pine Mountain Lodge, and we have Jenny. She goes with her parents, and there is like this legend that Jenny's friend Tyler tells her, so she's just met Tyler, and he tells her the lodge is haunted. The voice you heard was the spirit calling to you. Because yeah, Jenny is hearing voices at night. And they lock the doors and shutters at night to keep the spirit from coming inside. If you let it inside, it will jump out of the body it's in and enter yours. Then you'll be forced to live on Earth for a year as a wandering mist. And she starts to think that Tyler is the spirit. So during the harvest moon, Tyler is banging on the door like, oh my god, let me in. And there is a dog that was like outside protecting Jenny. The dog starts coming for Tyler, and Tyler runs away. So then Jenny lets the dog in, and this is where it kind of lost me. The dog, called Bravo, gazed up at me gratefully. His sad brown eyes stared up to meet mine. Thanks, Jenny, he said. It's cold outside. And so it turned out that the dog was the spirit and talking. Like, I'm kind of sick of talking dogs. There are a lot of talking dogs and random talking animals in the Goosebumps series. I think it was Planet of the Lone Gnomes, where there was like this really ridiculous talking dog moment that was like the cliffhanger of that story. And there have been other instances of that as well. So I kind of really didn't love the ending of that, but I still gave it a 5 out of 10 because I love the atmosphere of it. I love the isolated setting of it, the ghost story kind of aspect of it as well. It felt pretty good, even if the plot fell short. So the average of More Tales to Give You Goosebumps, the second book, is a 3.6 out of 10. Not as good as the previous book, but I'm hoping that as long as there is at least one or two amazing stories in the books, which, you know, obviously the PS Don't Write Back story wasn't like mind-blowing or anything, but I still thought it was really good. As long as there's at least one or two of those stories in each volume moving forward, then I'm still going to be quite happy. And hopefully if I'm like negative about all the stories, that's okay, because I'm still going to count it as a win if I still enjoy a lot of the stories. And I still do really enjoy reading these short stories in general, even if I end up not loving them at the end. The act of reading them and just being immersed in 90s goosebumps again is making me really happy. So I know I'm being a little bit negative. 3.6 out of 10 is not the best, but I'm still having a blast. I really am. You may not believe this, but I gave one of the stories in this collection a 10 out of 10. A 10 out of 10. It's one of my favourites. And I also gave two stories 1 out of 10. So it kind of did have its ups and downs. But let's talk about the first story. So the first story is called The Choke Closet. I mean, it kind of gave me Matilda vibes, you know, the chokey. Kind of gave me those vibes. So we follow Travis and he is sent to summer school because he hasn't been doing that well. And so like he goes to summer school, there's a class of kids who are also there. And the teacher is Mr. Grimsley. And whenever a student doesn't do their homework or if they're not getting A's, then Mr. Grimsley sends them to the choke closet. And then you never hear from the kids again. How these teachers get away with stuff like this, I do not know. But yeah, one by one, the kids just seem to like be going missing. And I found that such a scary concept. Julie didn't show up or at lunch or the next day or any day after that. The same thing happened to Marty Blank. And you kind of get the impression that, oh, maybe they were just sent home. Maybe they just couldn't hack summer school. But then we get to the point where Travis gets a D. And so he is sent to the choke closet. And he goes there and it's essentially this really dark room where Dooley, Marty, Janice and everyone are. And behind them, shadows of other kids I'd never seen before, transparent figures, ghosts. And it sounds like whenever these kids get sent there, they stay there forever until they die. And you know what's really messed up about this story is that at the end, Travis puts his hands to his ears because it's to drown out the screeching, the horrible screeching sound of chalk on a chalkboard, the sound that I have to listen to forever. So can you imagine being like, I'm getting shivers and like chills thinking about it right now, but like, can you imagine being locked in a room with like kind of like nails on a chalkboard kind of sound, like, oh, like over and over and over again, like non-stop? I would go insane. I would go insane. So I gave that story a 6 out of 10 because just that concept alone is kind of like terrifying. It's a really like, normal thing to be scared of because, you know, you think of like nails on a chalkboard. A lot of people don't like that. Like, that's like an everyday problem kind of thing. And I love it when R.L. Stine takes a normal problem and twists it like that. It's a genuine fear that people have and he gave his own Goosebumps spin on it. And those are the kind of stories I love. But it's probably going to be one that sticks forever with me. Next we have Home Sweet Home and I gave this one a 4 out of 10. This one kind of reminded me a little bit of Chicken Chicken. A little bit, as well as the story from the previous collection. Gosh, I forgot what it's called, but you know the one where her little brother is like being made into like this doll thing and you have this like weird witchy woman who ends up getting defeated and stuff. Like this is the exact same thing essentially. We have Sharon, her sister Alice has this dollhouse and she loves playing with dolls and Sharon kind of like tortures her a little bit and she puts like a doll upside down in the sink every now and then we find out about Mrs. Forster, who is really strange. Some kids told me she had weird powers. They said she can change herself to animals. And then they go to this yard sale where Mrs. Forster has this like store thing, but Mrs. Forster isn't there. She just has this sign that says, oh, leave the money on the table. So Alice gets this little lamp for her dollhouse and Sharon accidentally knocks something over and it smashes and she runs away without paying. Alice does pay for the lamp. Sharon doesn't pay for the damaged vase, I think it was. And the only reason she dropped it was because like this massive spider came out of it. And because of that, like, I do have arachnophobia a little bit. You know, I feel like I've gotten better over the years with my arachnophobia, but that's again another like common fear. But after this, it does seem like she's kind of cursed to see spiders nearly all the time. So like when she's lying in bed, she'll see a spider coming down at her and she'll see spiders coming out of the curb. It just seems like she's being cursed. And the story ends with this spider going on her head and it gets its legs into her scalp and she begins to shrink. So Sharon begins to shrink into like this doll-sized human and it turns out that the spider was Mrs. Forster and now she's cursed Sharon to live as this tiny little doll forever. And Sharon, she kind of gets used to it by the end. Alice has fixed up the dollhouse really nice. I'm comfortable inside it. Yeah, so I guess the parents just let their child play with the other child who is now, you know, like an inch or two high. Like, she ain't gonna accidentally kill her. And then we actually end the story with Sharon saying, why does she think it's so funny to stick my head in the sink? So again, it's kind of like that full circle moment where Sharon used to put Alice's dolls in the sink upside down, and now she's getting that done to her too. So it's kind of like a beautiful full circle moralistic kind of story by the end. So I quite like that. But I only give it 4 out of 10 because I didn't really do too much new and original. I just kind of found the spider stuff quite scary. And then we have Don't Wake Mummy, which I gave a 5 out of 10. That one was actually pretty good. And I'm going to Egypt at the end of next month, like on Halloween. I'm going to be touching down in Egypt. And I kind of like how this one incorporated a mummy and it had that kind of Egyptian vibe. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, this one. The main character, Jeff, he's scared of pretty much everything. He has an older sister, Kim, who loves to scare him. Of course, it's Goosebumps. And their parents, well, the dad, he works as a sort of like museum curator. And for some reason, he allows this mummy sarcophagus coffin thing that's wrapped in chains to be put into the basement of the house. And he just like lets it happen. I don't think anyone would actually ever allow anything that should be in a museum to be in just a random person's basement. I just don't think that could ever happen, so it's a little bit strange. Anyway, I had to like forget about that. I was just like, you know what? Let's just let the story play out. And so it does turn out that Kim is trying to scare her brother by dressing up as a mummy, and she runs into the basement and she doesn't realise that her family have now locked her in it, because even the mum and the dad are like, oh, sorry, we didn't realise that, you know, you were telling the truth, Jeff, about this mummy. We'll lock the basement and then we'll sort it out tomorrow. What I don't understand is the dad. The dad never believed Jeff at all up to this point. He was just like, don't be silly. Like, obviously the mummy's not going to come to life. And then the dad randomly says to them, well, actually, there's something I didn't tell you. There's a rumour that this mummy really is alive. So like this entire time when your son's been telling you, oh, the mummy's alive, he just didn't listen to him because that's impossible. And then he goes on to say, this mummy was given to us by another museum. They didn't want it anymore because the night god said the mummy rose after dark to wander the halls. But the curator promised there would be no problem as long as nobody took the chains off the box. The mummy can't come alive unless someone takes the chains off. So I'm like, why, again, would you put that into your basement? And also, if the museum knows that if you just put the chains around the box, the mummy can't come out, then why do they give it to a random... I mean, yes, he's a curator, but like, why would you put that in your house? Why would you put that in your house? No matter what, you know that there is this like thing about it where, oh, I take the chains off, it comes to life. Then why don't you just give it to the museum? Keep the chains on. You know what I mean? It's like, it's such a stupid explanation. And then it goes to Kim, who, you know, was pretending to be the mummy, and she's locked in the basement now. She is like, oh, you know, I'm just going to stay down here the night. And she has these chains wrapped around her that she took off the sarcophagus. So I did like that. I did like that. Like, she took it off so that she could use it for her own costume. And then it ends the story with the door opening and she's trapped in this basement. Like, their parents have, like, locked the door and they've all gone back to bed. And she is locked in the basement this morning. So that was kind of terrifying. Like, I did really like that. So 5 out of 10. I might end up giving it a 6 out of 10 at some point. Like, I do think by the end of the day, it is a pretty good story. The next one, I didn't like that much. I gave it a 2 out of 10. It's called I'm Telling. All it is this guy called Adam. He finds this random gargoyle in the middle of the woods. And this gargoyle is like spewing out this like green goop. So Adam fills his water gun with it. And his little sister comes. She's like, I'm telling mum, I'm telling mum. Nah, nah, nah. So Adam squirts her and she turns to stone. And then he's trying to get her home. And as she's a statue, and this reminded me of That's So Raven actually. He passes his school, but his art teacher's like, oh, Adam, it's the, you know, sculpture contest. It's like the art contest or whatever. Oh, I see you did your assignment. Come on, bring it in. You might win first prize. So like all of these coincidences are happening at once. So he does end up winning the prize because his sister is so lifelike. And then he manages to get his sister unstatuesqued when he squirts her again with a water gun. And this gargoyle thing also comes to life that he has to squirt to get it to go to stone. It ends with the little sister saying, I'm telling, I'm telling, I'm telling. Adam says again, I don't think so. And then he squirted her again, thus turning her to stone again. And it's just like, what a boring story. Like, nothing really happens. All he did was win an art contest because he turned his sister into a statue. Like, do you remember that That's So Raven episode where she pretends to be Chelsea's statue because she accidentally broke it, like Raven. She accidentally broke her best friend's statue. Like, it kind of just gave me those vibes, so that's why I didn't give it a 1. But not great. But the next story is a 10 out of 10. This is my favourite one, and it is the Haunted House game. It was made into a TV show episode, except I can't remember anything about the TV show episode other than It has an actress from Smallville in it, and it also features this life-size board game that was in a abandoned haunted house, and I always remember thinking that that was so cool. Like when I watched that episode when I was a kid, I thought that whole big ass life-size board game thing was the coolest thing I've ever seen. So that's kind of how I remembered, oh, the haunted house game. Like I always remember that, but I didn't know what the story was or like the twist or anything. So we have 4 kids. We have Jonathan and his best friend Nadine, and he also has his 2 little siblings, Noah and Annie. And it starts off with Jonathan saying, aha, here it is, we're going to play Haunted House. Oh, Jonathan, Nadine won't, not that dumb game again. Come on, it's fun, it's really scary. Yeah, that game is dumb, Noah echoed. Can't we play Parachesi? Annie complained. This is better, there aren't any ghosts in Parachesi. And Nadine says, but we played it 100 times before. It's always different, I insisted. Come on, let's play Haunted House. And so these kids, they have this board game. It's definitely a lot cooler in the TV show episode because it is like a life-size thing. But in this, it's just like a board game, a little bit like Jumanji. So it's just like on the table. So it's not as thrilling as that. But whenever they land on something, so say they roll the dice and they land on a square, the square says something like, you hear creaking footsteps on the stairs. And then, you know, they put their marker on that spot and then they do hear creaking on the stairs in the house and they're like, oh, that was strange. And then another one is something like wind rattles the windows, and then at that moment, wind rattles the windows. You hear an eerie moan, the lights go out, and these things keep happening as they're playing this game. And at this point I was like, just stop playing. Just put it away. Like, obviously this is like bad for you, like you're getting too scared. And I love the atmosphere of this story as well because you do feel the fear in it. You do, you know, see the lights going out, you see the candles getting blown out and you're hearing the wind and the rattling of the windows, and it's very atmospheric. Like, I love R.L. Stine's stories when he writes atmosphere in it. I think he does it so well. And so they decide, yeah, this game is haunted. You hear a bony hand tapping on the window, and then they hear like a bang, there's like a bony hand at the window. I don't know why at this point they still like play on. And the last one that they land on is scared to death. And they're like, oh no, no. So they scream and it feels like hours upon hours is going on and it's dark and everything's happening. And then Jonathan finds a newspaper as he's like trying to run out the door. 4 kids die in mystery death. My eyes rolled over the first paragraph. Police were completely baffled when they found 4 kids dead in an old mansion last night. It looked to me as if they were scared to death, declared one police officer. And then he looks at the date, and it's March 14th, 1942. So that's when we died, I realised. We died over 50 years ago, and we've been haunting this whole house ever since. And then it ends the story with Jonathan finding the game, and Jonathan goes, aha, here it is, we're going to play Haunted House. Oh, Jonathan, not that dumb game again. Come on, it's fun, it's really scary. Yeah, that game is done. Can't we play Parcheesi? I don't even know what that is. This is better, there aren't any ghosts in Parcheesi. So we were told from the beginning, and then Nadine saying, but we played it 100 times before. Again, like we were told from the beginning, it's always different, I insisted. Come on, let's play Haunted House. So it's like this terrifying time loop that they're kind of in, and they're doomed to die by being scared to death every single time playing this game. And I just kind of love that. Like, I literally love that. Whenever we come across a really unique concept in a Goosebumps book, I'm going to latch onto because they come few and far between. I freaking love the Haunted House game story. It's amazing. My favourite tales to give you goosebumps ever. And I totally forgot. I don't even know if this like actually happens in the TV show episode because they would have had to have made that a 22-minute episode. So I can't remember if they added any twists or took any twists out. I can't remember anything about it. Just the cool life-size board game stuff. So I loved it. I loved it. 10 out of 10. Best story I've read so far. Then we have Change for the Strange, which I gave a 4 out of 10. This one follows Jane and her best friend, Lizzie. They go to this store called Change for the Strange, and Jane gets this like snakeskin jacket, and she puts this jacket on when she's at Lizzie's, and she starts to feel like really sick, so she leaves, but as she's in the garden, she turns into a snake, and it looks like Lizzie's brother's like about to like take her and stuff, but then she also has like the zipper on her, so he pulls the zip, and she becomes human again. So that's pretty much the story, is that this store apparently seems to sell things that turns you into that thing. And the reason why I gave it 4 out of 10 was because the moment where she turns into a snake was actually very creepily described. She felt hot, her skin felt as if it were burning up. Then I flicked out my tongue. I could smell a dog and a squirrel. And then she has no hair, no ears. Her whole head was covered with dry, cracked skin. Then the world seemed to tilt. And then, yeah, it just goes on. And it's like so good. I love that visual so much. But that's kind of pretty much the story. She does want to be a track star. And at the very end, she does have the rabbit shoe things that Lizzie bought, and she's using them to like jump higher and higher. So that's a story. I gave it 4 out of 10 literally just because of the snake transformation, honestly. Next we have The Perfect School, which I gave a 3 out of 10. It felt a little bit like The Chalk Closet, but a little bit different. So we have Brian O'Connor, he's getting sent to the perfect boarding school. And what it is at this perfect boarding school, they end up getting replaced with these robots, and then the robots get sent home with the parents now that the kids are perfect. And Brian also meets CJ, who he thinks seems like a cool guy, but when Brian is like trying to sneak out and stuff, he runs into CJ, and CJ actually throws him into this room where the robots are like being made. And then you think that it's one of the robots that goes home with Brian's family, but it turns out that Brian, like the twist of it is that Brian, the real Brian, pulled CJ into the dark chamber and escaped before the wall closed up. And he ended up sneaking into the robot room, and he pretended to be the robot, and he got that robot to pretend to be the real him. And so, like, we end the book with Brian just going back home. So, like, it kind of is rather boring. I don't know why I gave it a 3 out of 10. I should probably lower that to a 2. But, yeah, it wasn't really that interesting. It was very dull. Oh, For the Birds, I actually thought it was pretty good. I gave that one a 6 out of 10. We follow Kim and her parents and her 2 brothers go to Bird Haven Lodge because everyone is obsessed with birds except Kim. Kim hates birds, like she thinks it's weird and strange, but her family are obsessed. So they go to this lodge, and the person who runs this lodge is called Mr. Dove. And Kim, she stays in a little room called the Cuckoo's Nest. And there's like a lot of bird imagery, and I kind of love the isolated atmosphere that we gave Kim when she goes to like the Cuckoo's Nest. And Mr. Dove randomly says to Kim, I owe you a favor, because Kim finds his clippers, and he says, I owe you, Kim, I owe you. Do you want revenge? And Kim's like, what do you mean revenge? Like, revenge on your family because you obviously don't want to be here. And she's like, no, that's fine. So a bit later on, when they go to Mockingbird Maze, they see like all of the birds, like there's so many birds, so many different birds, so many birds of different kinds. And this is when I was thinking, are all of these birds actually people? And then we see a huge hedge sculpture with 5 people carved out of the hedge. And Mr. Dove carved that family into this hedge. And you know, they kind of like, oh, that's cool, let's still go through this maze. So they go through this maze and they end up in this giant bird cage, which is kind of terrifying because if you think of Jurassic Park 3 with that massive bird cage, Kim's family all get transformed into birds, and then Kim, she's like, no, please don't do it. And he's like, I do owe you a favor, Kim. I want you to be happy. And then we end the story with her being turned into a cat. So she is the predator, and she's got all of this prey around her, including her family. That's how we end the story, which I thought was actually really good. Like, it did get a little bit obvious that all the birds were actually going to turn out to be people. But I kind of love the twist that she gets turned into a cat. Because, yeah, now she's going to start chasing and potentially killing her family. Like, how messed up is that? That is so messed up. So I gave that one 6 out of 10. And then the last 2 stories in this book were really terrible in my opinion. I gave them both 1 out of 10. So the first one is Aliens in the Garden. We follow Kurt, and he gets bullied at this park. And one day, this like flying saucer thing just like lands next to him. It's like very, very small though. It's like tiny. And he's getting bullied by this guy called Flip. And these like little creatures come out of the spaceship, and they have ray guns, and they blast the bully away, and then the bully comes back to try and get them, and Kurt also gets his friend Jenna to come help, and they're trying to protect this tiny little spaceship thing and these aliens. So they do end up saving this like spaceship. They throw it high into the air and it manages to fly off. They find like this little flag thing. So it's a rectangle, I told her, with stripes going across it, red and white stripes. The upper left hand corner is blue and it has a bunch of white stars on it, 50 stars. So that's like the American flag, I think, unless I'm like mistaken. So the twist of this is it's actually little humans. So us as humans must have found this new planet where there are other humans, but they're giant. And this is what the main characters were. And I just found that so uninteresting and so uninspired. It's been done to death before with Goosebumps. So I kind of just like that wasn't even scary. All it was these kids trying to protect this little spaceship, and they protect it from a bully. Okay. So 1 out of 10 for that one. I really didn't like that one. And then the last one was The Thumbprint of Doom. This is another one where genuinely nothing scary happens. In fact, nothing really happens, honestly. So we have Trisha, Jeremy, Harold. They're like best friends. And this new girl moves in. She's called Carla, and she's very superstitious, and she doesn't really want to do things with everyone because she's like very scared of them. And she says something about the thumbprint of doom, which if someone puts it on your forehead, you're doomed. Something horrible will happen to you in less than 24 hours. And they start getting sick of Carla's superstitions. So they are like, we've got to show Carla that superstitions are totally dumb. So like, let's do something to her kind of thing. So they have this carnival. They take Carla to it. There is Madame Wanda, and she is like scaring Carla. The psychic says, no, I don't believe what I say in your future. I cannot, I haven't got a choice. I cannot allow you to grow old and suffer. And then she puts her thumb on her head and says, I have given you the thumbprint of doom. And then Carla runs out, and her friends run out after her, and they're like, oh, don't worry, it was all a joke. We paid the sidekick to like say that. And then Carla's like, oh, I knew she couldn't give me the thumbprint of doom because only I have the power. So Carla, she puts her thumb on each of their heads and says, I've given you the thumbprint of doom, which scares those kids and they run off. And then it turns out that Madame Wanda, the psychic, is Carla's mum. And she says, that was a very mean joke, Carla. Well, they started it, Carla said. How long do you think it'll take them to realise that you have no powers, that you were just playing a trick on them? She's like, maybe later. So it was really just one big prank. It was just all one big joke. And those are the worst kinds of Goosebumps stories for me personally. I hate them so much. Because it's like, okay, you've just wasted my time. Because all of this was just a prank. All of it was just a joke. I hate that. Nothing scary about it whatsoever. So that was, unfortunately, a 1 out of 10. We start off, like, I think the first, like, 6 stories of this were pretty solid. And then the last 4 were, like, very hit and miss. Leading to, like, 2 absolute misses. This was very almost going to be my favourite collection so far. It has an average of 4.2 out of 10. The last 2 stories really dragged it down. But hey, we had the haunted house game in this one. Definitely one of my favourite Goosebumps stories ever. And it was only like 15 pages, so it just shows you that sometimes less is more. Okay, we are getting stranger and stranger with these stories. We started off with some like solid stories, and there's like the first 3 stories were pretty highly rated-ish. But then, like the last 6 stories, I mean, one of them was okay. But like there's so many 1s and 2s in this collection, and one of the stories is about a group of old women who turn out to be pedophiles. I'll get to that story in a second, but when I tell you, I was flabbergasted at that one. So we start off with a story called Pumpkin Juice, which I kind of liked. I gave it 6 out of 10. We follow Charlie and Frank, and they find this recipe for pumpkin juice, and they make it, they drink it, and they end up getting this like really ravenous hunger, and it's Halloween night. In fact, all of these stories are set during Halloween, which was great. So yeah, they are so hungry, and they keep eating things, and they can't quite quench their hunger. And you know, like they're slurping worms from the ground, and they're eating slugs and stuff like that. And then they find out that the cure is a whole bunch of ingredients, but as long as it uses the original pumpkin that they had originally ate. And when they get home, Charlie's mum has like cleaned everything, so they can't even say the pumpkin, like, what happened to the pumpkin? And then the mum was like, oh, you know, I made a pie. So the pumpkin is in the pie that's in the oven. So they take it out, they eat it, and they're all better. They eat all of that pumpkin. And then the mum comes down and she was like, oh, you know that drink you made that was left in the blender, Charlie? I loved it. It was so good. But now I'm so hungry. So now she is affected, but that entire pumpkin was in the pie. And now that the 2 kids have eaten all of that pie, there's nothing left for the mum. So like, what's going to happen to the mum? You know what I mean? Like, I kind of love the implication of that. That's why I gave it a 6 out of 10. Because like, even though it wasn't really the most scariest or anything, I do think it had like quite a good story. And it was pretty fun to see the 2 kids like try to eat as much as they could. I thought that was great. The next one is called Attack of the Tattoo. And this one was a strange one as well, but I also gave it a 6 out of 10. I was unsure about it for the longest time, but then it got to the end and I was like, you know what, actually, I can imagine how creepy this would be. So we follow Jeannie and she's been trick-or-treating, and at the bottom of her bag is like, you know, one of those fake tattoos. And so she gets it, she tries to put it on, but you can't just put it on, you have to put it on with water that has been burned by the sun. And so like she puts it on, it's like this snake tattoo, and then every now and then like a snake is coming out of her arm, like from this tattoo, and like she can't get this tattoo off. She's like trying to use different things, and she's trying so hard to clean herself, and she just can't get this tattoo off. And then it turns out that all the kids pretty much in the neighborhood got this strange tattoo, but nobody else can figure out how to put it on. And she's like, oh well, I'm not telling anyone how to put it on because this is a nightmare. She does then end up finding out that the only way to take it off is to wash it in water that's bathed in full moon light. So the next full moon just happens to be that night. So there is like this really good scene where Jeannie is like trying to get this water on her arm, but like snakes keep coming out and they're attacking her, and it's like a full moon and it's quite atmospheric, and I really love that. I thought it was really good. And so she manages to finally get this tattoo off, and then the ending is her going to school in this prick called Zach. He's managed to figure out how to like get the tattoos on people. Pretty much everyone at school now has like this tattoo on. Obviously Jeannie doesn't have her tattoo on anymore, and neither does Maggie, her best friend. But Zach, obviously I would have punched him in the face. Zach, he just comes up to them, he just slaps on one of the tattoos that's like got the sun-soaked water on it. And now both Maggie and Jeannie have the tattoos on again. And then Jeannie turns to Maggie and says, Maggie, is the moon still full tonight or do we have to wait a whole month? And the tattoo that she now has on her arm is like a rat. So she will most likely have rats coming out of her arm. And her friend Maggie has a tattoo of a hairy tarantula. So like all of those things will be like coming out of them. I kind of love that idea of a fake tattoo where those really scary creatures like will just come out of you. That is quite terrifying. So I really enjoyed that. 6 out of 10. And the next one's called The Wish. This one was a 5 out of 10. It wasn't really scary, but I again really liked the story of it. I liked the kind of twist of it. And can you say like the first 3 stories I have so many positive things to say? Like it starts off so well. But we have The Wish and we follow Max. And Max has a brother called Eugene. Eugene makes Max's life absolute hell. And Eugene eats all of Max's Halloween candy. And pretty much all of the houses are now closed for trick-or-treating. Except one house. So Max goes up to this house. There's like an old lady. And when he knocks, she opens the door and she grabs hold of him. And she won't let go until she gives him her treat. And the treat is this rock. This weird rock that she gives him. She warns Max not to throw it away. And he runs home. And as he is throwing this rock away, he wishes that he was an only child. And then when he wakes up, all of the children of the world have disappeared. So he isn't just an only child, he's an only child on Earth. Obviously that isn't like the most original idea or anything like that, but I loved again like the Halloween setting. I love the hopelessness of like the situation because we end the story with all of the like adults in this town chasing him down and he's now in a cage, and in the cage is a plaque that reads endangered species. So now he will be on display probably until he becomes an adult or something like that. So I kind of like that idea. Again, like it wasn't really that scary, but it wasn't really offensive. And then we get to the next story, which is called An Old Story. This is the one with the PDF files. In this, it's just so weird. Like I was reading this, I was like, this is just so uncomfortable. So we follow Tom, who is 12, and his 10-year-old brother John. And the parents are like the worst parents in the world. Like they keep neglecting their kids, they keep forgetting about them. And then this weird lady knocks. She says that she is Aunt Dahlia, and she gives them cookies with a prune in the middle. And she keeps making them eat prunes. And these prunes are making them look older. So they get wrinkles, their hair starts falling out, they start to get bald, their hair turns grey, like things like that. Like they start to look older. Then all of Aunt Dahlia's friends come and they're like older women. And one of them is like, my name is Lillian, aren't you sweet? You're greying nicely. And another woman says to John, I'm Mimi, I have a very nice retirement fund, enough for 2 to live on. And then another tall woman says, don't hug the boys, ladies, give us all a chance to meet them. The old ladies were flirting with me, I realised. Yuck. Like literally, we have these old women hitting on a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. Even though, yes, they are starting to appear older, they're getting wrinkles and stuff, they're still children. They're still children. I was turning to an old man. This can't be happening, I thought. I'm only 12. John was hunched on the sofa, smothered by the old ladies. And then when they run into the bedroom to like find the cure, Mimi says they didn't escape today. They were getting so nice and old. Those prunes worked wonders. So yeah, Aunt Dahlia's prunes are like making them look older. That little one is cute. I'll take him. Lillian says she wants to marry Tom. Aunt Dahlia was turning us into old men so these old ladies could marry us. And like Aunt Dahlia is like saying, oh, but first you guys will have to pay my fee. So Aunt Dahlia is like selling these children on and making a profit out of selling these children to these old women who then want to like marry them and stuff like that. PDF files. This is a whole PDF rink. This is a whole situation up in here. They do get the antidote. It's anti-aging wrinkle cream, and they throw it at Aunt Dahlia, and she ages rapidly in front of their eyes and like turns into powder. And then the mum and dad come home. The mum and dad are like, wait, hang on, you were with your aunt? Bear in mind, like, this has been days. This has been days. Oh, did you have fun with your mother's aunt? And the mum says, my aunt? I thought she was your aunt. And the dad's like, she wasn't my aunt. Like, and then they realise, oh my god, we left our sons with a total stranger. We must be the worst parents in the world. Yes. Yes, like they were the worst parents in the world. Like, how do you do that? How do you leave them? Like, these kids were starving beforehand as well. Like, they were like, where are our parents? Like, we're starving, we're being left alone. They're terrible. The next day when they go to school, Becca, who is like new girls' school, she has prune cookies. And she says, my Aunt Susan came to visit. She packed my lunch. I don't get it. She's really into prunes. So, like, we really do have all of these old women finding young children to age them up so that they can marry them off. There is a whole PDF file ring here. This is essentially what the story is about. It's about pedophilia. So this is a 1 out of 10. Like, I didn't like it. Like, this was a terrible story anyway, but it was a whole experience reading it. I couldn't believe my eyes. And then we have the Scarecrow, and again, I don't love stories when they're just all a joke, and this was essentially all a joke. So I gave this one a 1 out of 10 as well. There is this random Scarecrow that appears in front of a house, and 3 kids. We have Darlene, Scott, and Melanie. And this Scarecrow has like this really expensive scarf on, has some expensive gloves on, and a cap on. And each of the 3 kids want what that Scarecrow has. So they build up to like stealing it. So Melanie ends up stealing the scarf, she puts it on, but her throat starts to get sore and she has to skip school because like she can't speak. And then Scott ends up stealing the cap. However, he starts to get really bad headaches and he starts becoming very forgetful. And then Darlene, after all of this is happening to her friends, decides, oh yeah, I still want those gloves. So she ends up going up and steals the gloves, except something like grabs her. She thinks it's a Scarecrow, but it turns out that was actually Scott and Melanie playing a prank on her the entire time. So the fact that this was just all one big prank makes me hate the story, because I hate stories where it's just one big prank. So it was not even scary, you know, it was just a whole 15 pages of them trying to get the bravery to just go up to the Scarecrow and steal off it. There was nothing really scary happening. We end the story with, you know, the Scarecrow with a wide red grin across its face. But that's it. Like, is it actually alive? Is it not? You don't know. You will never know. The next story is called Awesome Ants, and I did give this one a 4 out of 10 because I love the implication of it. It is the only good story in the latter half of this book. This one, we have Dave, and he has gotten this ant farm that he's gotten delivered from a company. Also, I have this weird thing that happened in my copy of this book. I don't know if it's happened in anyone else's copy, but it's like this weird random thing that's covered up some of the writing. But he needs to do a science project for school and he's observing ants, but this company have sent him a super jumbo awesome ant farm and he needs to add 5 gel caps per day. Do not feed the ants anything else. Warning. And the first thing that he does with his friend Ben is to give them food, like general normal human food, even though they were warned not to feed them anything but the gel caps. Never mind, it doesn't matter. The ants start to get a little bit bigger, and when he goes to school, because he's taken some of the ants to school himself, when he goes to school, one of the ants is like massive and it just started to chase him, and that was kind of scary. So that's kind of why I've given it like a 4 out of 10, is because like that chase was a bit scary. The idea of this massive ant with its big legs and its pincers and stuff is quite scary, and I kind of like the ending a lot actually. So he does end up getting to his backyard and the ants are like all out, like they're massive and they've like escaped the ant farm thing, and the ants then end up forcing Dave to have the gel cap that they were supposed to have, and then Dave goes unconscious. When he wakes up, he's actually in the ant farm. Him and his entire science class, including the teacher, they're all now trapped in the ant farm, and the massive ants are outside watching them. So everything is being flipped. Dave, who was observing the ants to begin with, is now the person being observed by the ants. And the teacher's like, well, we better get to work. We better build rooms for ourselves and tunnels to get the rooms. Come on, everyone, get to work. It'll be a wonderful learning experience, Mr. Lance said. Don't you agree? Awesome, I replied. And I kind of like that. Like, it's a little bit silly, but also, again, like, it has that kind of flipping on its head of the story kind of thing. So I liked it. I liked it. And then we have Please Don't Feed the Bears, which I gave a 1 out of 10. This was just not scary whatsoever. We follow Sarah, and she goes to Cuddle Bear Land because her baby sister wants to go to Cuddle Bear Land. So Sarah gets to Cuddle Bear Land and she breaks away from her parents and her sister. And yeah, it's just like a theme park of cuddly teddy bears. And Sarah, she ends up getting lost. She makes everything worse for herself by just like continuing on when she should just like, you know, turn back. However, she does manage to get to the cave. Caution, employees only. And while in there, the employees are forcing her to eat these like cookies things. Which again, like, okay, we're having like more food that turns someone into something. And so Sarah does end up starting to, well, she thinks she's turned into a bear. She feels like her ears and like the hairy and stuff. So she runs out, she gets to her parents, and it turns out that the ears that she could feel were just a cap that they gave her. She wasn't a bear at all. And when she gets home, her baby sister finds a bag of crackers that the employees gave her. I think that turns the sister into a Care Bear. That's it. That's a Goosebumps story, by the way. That is a Goosebumps story. Okay, like nothing scary, really boring, about a Cuddle Bear Land. You know what I mean? Like, it's no horror land, is it? The Goblin's Glare is the next story, and I also gave this one a 1 out of 10. While I hate the ones where they're all just a prank and it turns out to be just a prank at the end, I also hate the ones where it all turns out to be a dream or a nightmare by the end too. We follow Mike, who loves drawing. He is amazing at artwork, and he creates this weird looking goblin for to hang up on the porch during Halloween, except he makes the goblin look like really scary. It's almost lifelike. And then he just has a couple of nightmares where it looks like the goblin is about to get him and he keeps waking up. And then in the last one, yeah, I literally wrote after the second time it happened, where I was still in school, I had fallen asleep. Fuck you. Like, literally, fuck you. I hate stories where it's just a dream, it's just a nightmare. What a waste of time. And then Halloween comes, and then Mike, he tries to get prepared for what is probably going to be his nightmare, but it turns out that he's actually in the goblin's nightmare. So, like, he sees himself sleeping, he's trying to wake himself up, but the goblin comes to, like, actually, you're in my nightmare, so you can't get out. And then that's it. I mean, him being trapped in the goblin's nightmare does sound pretty scary in a way, but that's it. That's like what we get implied at the end. We get nothing else during this entire story that is that scary, because the entire time it's just all his dream. Well, the first one and then the second dream, and then finally it's actual nightmare and he's trapped in the goblin's nightmare, but you find that out in the very last sentence. So it's like, okay, then the entire story wasn't that scary then. It was just the end. So 1 out of 10. I'm sorry, I'm very nitpicky with that. And then we have Bats About Bats, which I gave a 2 out of 10. This one follows Liz and Suzanne. They welcome Dory, who is quite new to their school, and Dory is obsessed with bats. And they decide that they're going to prank Dory and make her think that a vampire has come to get her during one of the sleepovers. So they play this prank on Dory. She runs away screaming, and so the day after she rings her friends up and Dory says, oh, like, do you want to come to mine for Halloween? And so the friends are like, oh, she's going to play a prank back, isn't she? So they go to Dory's, they go to her basement, they see a laboratory, and there are 2 human-sized bats down there, and then they run away. They turn to see Dory, she changes into a bat, and yeah, they just run away screaming, essentially. That's the story. But I really did quite like the Halloween setting of this one. I liked it when the bats would actually attack. There were like a couple of bat attack scenes which were kind of creepy, so that's why I gave it 2 out of 10 and not a 1 out of 10. And then the final one is the Spacesuit Snatcher. This one I gave a 2 out of 10 because the majority of it was just a joke and just one big prank, but then the ending kind of proves that there is something else out there, and it wasn't just the last line, which if it had just been the last line I would have probably given this 1 out of 10. So this one follows Laura, and she has this sister called Tammy, and Laura, she is making a space transmitter. She wants to talk to outer space, she wants to talk to aliens and stuff. And yeah, she's been like fiddling on with like this radio thing, and then one day this radio talks back to her and it says, we are coming, Laura Nesbitt, we are coming to get you. We will capture you, Laura Nesbitt, your days of fun are over. No more mom and dad. Like, it's kind of scary. Like, that was quite scary. And then a couple of days later, an alien appears at the window. Listen to this. Bang, the alien slammed his hand against the window. The creature had a glowing orange face with folds of wrinkled, saggy skin around 2 giant round silver eyes. I was like, damn, Trump is really doing anything he can to win this election, isn't he? But it turns out that the transmitter was a joke that Tammy played on her sister, and the alien was also just a joke too. It was me all along. I made a cassette and hid it in your room. The voice was Liz's brother. I got you good. But then there is a flash and Tammy disappears, and she's replaced with a big purple blob. And it turns out that the aliens actually do exist. We take no sister, she put on the suit, that means she volunteered. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. So at the yard sale at the very start, Laura gets this suit of this man. Like, she just accepts it. This man is like, oh, you're building a space transmitter? I used to do that when I was a kid too. And aliens left this suit outside my house. And it says that whenever you put it on, we will come to get you. And so Tammy ended up putting on the spacesuit instead of Laura. And so now, yeah, they're saying, we've taken her sister, she put on the suit, that means she volunteered. But she didn't know she was volunteering, I protested. If you wear the suit, you must be prepared to come with us. The alien faded. And then they leave by saying, thanks for the radio show, but next time could you please some rock and roll? Like, it was a bit of a shit last line, but that was kind of the story. It did turn out that aliens were real, so I'll give it that. Even though most of it was fake, the aliens were real. So unfortunately, the average for this one is 2.9 out of 10, which is kind of terrible. We did have some good stories at the start. Pumpkin Juice, Attack the Tattoo, The Wish, I quite liked. And yeah, after that, it was just shit show after shit show. I do still have high hopes that the final 2 Tales to Give You Goosebumps books are going to give me goosebumps. I am currently doing some reading sprints with my patrons right now, and I managed to finish another Tales to Give You Goosebumps book, and I will say I think only one of the tales in this one actually gave me some goosebumps. This was not like the best collection overall, unfortunately. So the first story is The Haunted Guitar, which I gave a 4 out of 10, which these days is pretty good. We follow Jeffrey, and He's like one of the worst main characters you could read in a Goosebumps book, because we've just had this music store get burned down. The floor is still quite hot. The water from the hoses from the firemen is still dripping from the roof of this, you know, burned down shop. And what this boy decides to do is to go inside this burned down shop, which is so dangerous, by the way. His friend Beth tries to stop him. He goes in and he's like, oh, look at all of these instruments that have been like kind of destroyed in this fire, because it's a music shop. And then he finds this guitar that has actually not been damaged by the fire. And so he gets the guitar and his friend Beth goes, why are you taking it? And he just says, because it's here. Like, again, like, this place has just been burned. Like, the poor owner of this shop is like getting the last and only thing that actually got like saved from the fire, and he's just gonna take it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's terrible, absolutely terrible. So he ends up taking it home with him. And like, this is like such a short story, which I know is stupid to say considering all of them are short stories, but it's literally like 2 scenes. Like, this entire story is only 2 scenes, because then he ends up taking the guitar to his home and it's in the corner of his bedroom, and then he starts to hear music coming from it, which is kind of scary. That gave me goosebumps. And there's a guy called Memphis Willie, and this is Gertie, my guitar. So the person playing the guitar is a ghost, and he has been doomed to play this guitar for the rest of his afterlife. And he's playing it, and it's like this beautiful haunting melody. And Willie goes to Jeffrey, oh, shall we be partners? Like, I know you want to be a good player, so like, let's have a partnership, and you will actually be able to play like music as well from this guitar. And so Jeffrey's like, yeah, sure, why not? Because again, he's not the smartest. So they've entered this partnership now. Jeffrey starts playing the guitar. However, he tried to stop playing. He tried to put it down, but he couldn't. Some kind of force held it in place. My fingers kept moving, and he can't stop playing the guitar. And the ghost is like, stop, I told you, even after I died, I couldn't stop. I love it so much. Now I don't have to stop. I don't ever have to stop, not ever. And this poor boy's fingers are like getting hurt from playing this guitar. And like, we end it with the dad coming in being like, oh my god, that's excellent, keep playing, keep playing. Is he cursed to play this guitar for the rest of time? Like, for the rest of his life? That's kind of scary. So yeah, 4 out of 10 for that one. The next one is called Tune In Tomorrow. It had a good concept, but like a weak execution. So this one gets a 3 out of 10. We follow Elizabeth, and she is channel surfing. She comes across Channel 6. And on Channel 6 is this show called Looking Toward Tomorrow. And there is a girl called Eleanor. She is the main character. And whatever Eleanor does, Elizabeth kind of does herself too. So Eleanor gets a knock at the door and gets a letter, and at the same time Elizabeth gets a knock at the door and a letter. And then she keeps watching the show, and the character in the show, her mum gets hurt, and then in real life Elizabeth's mum gets hurt. So it's kind of like eerily similar, and then randomly the TV just goes black. Like, it just stops. And Elizabeth is screaming like, no, 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 like, what happened? What happened? I need to know, like, what happened next. So she tries to ring up Channel 6. There is no Channel 6. And there is just, like, no way of knowing. And then that section ends with somebody who's watching Elizabeth, actually, on the TV. So the person who we end with, we don't know who it is, just that they're watching with their friend Lisa. And Lisa says, I thought life with Elizabeth was going to be really good, but it's just another stupid soap opera. Yeah, I agreed. Why are people on TV so dumb? So it's like, this person is watching Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is watching Eleanor. And it's like, okay. So I love the concept. I thought the concept was good, but nothing scary happened whatsoever. And I don't even think the implication of this is like really that scary. I just find it a bit of a unique concept. So I gave it a 3 out of 10. Then we have Live Bait. This one I gave a 4 out of 10. Again, a little bit of an improvement. This one we follow Timmy, and he has a sort of friend called Duke who he doesn't actually like. And Duke is like a little bit of a mean kid to him. They're on a summer vacation at Lake Bigelow, and Timmy absolutely hates fish, and Duke is like, oh, shall we go fishing? And he's like, well, I guess okay. And they go to this like shack where this guy's like, oh, do you boys want to buy some bait? And the boys are like, yes, yes, we want some bait, we want some bait. So they take some bait and they go fishing, and this massive fish comes and almost like kills them. Like, they go actually inside the fish, which is kind of scary. Like, when you think about like being inside something like that, that's one of my fears. Like, one of my fears is being eaten by a shark, and like being alive enough to like be inside the shark's stomach. Pinocchio did a number on me. So they managed to get out of the fish's belly, and they bring the fish back, and then the guy who sold them the bait was like, oh, actually you guys were the bait, thank you so much for bringing this back for me. And then we end the story by this random ass man throwing a net over the 2 boys and keeping them forever. Puts them into a jar with a label saying live bait. So like, they're going to be used as bait for the rest of their lives now as well. Kind of like that, kind of like that. Next is Something Strange About Marcy. I hated this one. I gave it 1 out of 10. This one was stupid. This one was so dumb. So we have a group of friends. They don't have names, not even the main character. He's just like, oh, my friends and I, my friends and I. And one day, this girl called Marcy, she just appears. and the main character just decides, oh, she's evil. You know, because Marcy is just like observing them from afar. She doesn't approach. She seems to be a little bit odd. So the main character is just like, okay, Marcy is evil. And then one day she has this square black case strapped to her shoulder. And the main character says, oh, I'm going to follow her home. I want to follow her home. I'm going to see what her deal is. He finds her living in a tent. And he's like, okay, well, the mystery is still like quite rife. Like, I still don't know what's going on. And then the next day she comes up and she says, hello, hello. And she holds out food for them. And he's like, oh, she's actually being nice finally. And then it freaking ends like this. I guess as she raised the object to her mouth, she spoke into it. Testing, testing, she said. My friends and I all cast curious glances at one another. What on earth was going on here? This is Dr. Marcy Gold. I had been observing the subjects for 9 days. Today, on day 10, I made personal contact with them. And that's when the mystery was cleared up. That's when I realised why Marcy was so strange. That's why I realised why Marcy was so different from us. That's when I realised that Marcy wasn't an orangutan. So the characters of this one were all orangutans. And Marcy was just there to observe them. That's the story. Oh my god. 1 out of 10. What was that story? It wasn't even scary. It wasn't even remotely interesting. It was stupid. Then we have The Ghost Sitter, which I also gave a 1 out of 10. This was like such a non-story. It felt like a waste of my time. So we have our main character Ray. He's just moved into a new house that's a bit of a fixer-upper. His parents are like, oh, we're going to fix this up. It's going to be our forever home. And then at school, he's told that the deserted house next door is haunted. And there is a house next door, and he sees these like dark eyes inside, and he's like, ooh, it's definitely haunted then. And then the mum says to Ray, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Hodge, who live there apparently, are asking them to do a few chores for them. And so like the mum has agreed that her son, against his will, that he will do chores for them even though they don't even know these people. So he has to go over and do some chores with his friend Mike. They go in and they can just hear like crashing in the house, and then the house is a bit of a mess as well, so they're clearing it up, and then they hear like a sort of stampeding footsteps kind of deal. So they end up running out of the place, and then they run into like the owners of the house, and they're like, oh, that's our pig. That's our pig that's causing all of that noise. Like, we decided not to tell you that there's a pig in the house. They're coming into your home to like do cleaning and do some chores. You didn't think it would be wise to tell them that there was a pig in the house? Okay. So that is the entire story, is that it just turns out to be a pig. There is a little bit of a twist in the end where Ray is asking the kids at school, and they're like, oh, we weren't talking about that house that's haunted. We're talking about the other house. He's like, oh, well, the only other house is my house. So then he realizes, oh, wait, so my house is haunted? We don't actually see any of the hauntings. We just get a full story about a pig. A pig. The next one, Fun with Spelling, I also gave a 1 out of 10. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This one is essentially all a revenge story. It reminded me a little bit of like Be Careful What You Wish For, and a little bit of Revenge or Us, I think it was called. I hate revenge Goosebumps stories as well. I know I'm such a negative Nancy. But this one follows a girl called Carrie, and she loves magic. Like, she wants to do magic, and her aunt leaves her this magic spell book. So what Carrie ends up doing is she is going to cast spells on her bully at school. Her bully is called Lisa McFly, and so she casts a spell to make her forget something important. And then the next day, Lisa McFly does forget her homework. So she's like, oh, so my spell works. And then she does another spell that makes Lisa burp. She can only burp for like an hour or something. And then she decides that tomorrow when Lisa McFly wears her name, I want her to think she can really fly. So every single time someone sees Lisa McFly, she tries to fly, just to make her embarrassed, I guess. And then the next day, that's what happens. Lisa is trying to fly. She's trying to fly. And then she ends up actually like flying. And then she goes out the window, and Carrie's like, oh no, I need to break the spell because she could hurt herself. So Carrie runs home from school, and then when she gets in, she realizes her little sister has taken the spell book, and then Lisa flies through the window, and then Carrie starts burping, and Carrie's younger sister has cast a spell on Carrie, and then Lisa is like, oh, well done to her sister, and so like they were in on it, but I'm still like, well, why did she allow herself to like get the flying spell on her that could have like killed her and like really hurt her or something? It was a whole bunch of nothing again. What was scary about that? Look at this cover, Goosebumps. It's a little bit scary, right? It's a bit of a scary cover. Not one part of that gave me goosebumps. Not one single part of it. Matt's lunchbox is next, and I gave that one a 2 out of 10. So that was a little bit better. This one follows Matt, and he doesn't have his lunchbox, so his mum gives him a lunchbox. And this lunchbox has like some monsters on the lunchbox. These monsters come to life and they eat everything. They eat everything that Matt is trying to eat himself. So for days upon days, Matt can't eat anything because the monsters get there first. And so the monsters tell Matt, oh, if you buy us, then you own us and you're responsible for us and we have to eat everything. So Matt has the idea of putting like the lunchbox at this sale place so somebody else would buy it, and then someone does buy it, so he's like, okay, great, I've got rid of the monsters. And then his uncle comes and gives him a matching thermos, and this thermos has the monsters on it, and these monsters say, boy, am I thirsty. So now he has the drink to deal with. It was the food before because they were always hungry. Now they're always going to be thirsty and he is going to have anything to drink. But now he knows exactly how to get rid of them. Just sell them to someone else. That's all he needs to do. There was not really anything again scary about it. I gave it a 2 instead of a 1 like the previous one because at least there were monsters. So that's pretty good. But literally nothing else to say about that story. It was so underwhelming. And the next one is called Stuck in 1957, which I gave it 2 out of 10. I gave it 2 out of 10 because I like the atmosphere of 1957. So our main character, Shanna, she loves her hair so much and she finds these glasses. These glasses transport her back to 1957. And at first she's like, oh, I need to leave. Oh, hang on, actually, this could be fun. So she stays there. Nothing happens, really. She goes to school, she comes home, and like the people there know who she is, but she doesn't know who they are. And her mum cuts her hair, and she is mortified. And that's the scariest thing about the story. Her mum cuts her hair, and she loves her hair so much, so she's butchered it. And so she manages to find someone at school who has this like time travel helmet. And so she puts the helmet on, she goes back to normal time. But now she has this awful hair and she doesn't want to be seen at school with it. So she decides after all of that effort of trying to get back to her present day, she puts the glasses back on because she would rather be stuck in 1957 than go to school with horrible hair. I mean, kind of relatable. Kind of relatable. I don't blame her too much for that. But I'm just saying, after all that trouble of trying to get back home, you decided to go straight back to 1957 just because of your hair. And again, nothing scary happened. There was not one scary thing about it. But I gave it a 2 because I like the timepiece. I love Goosebumps books set in the past. So it was kind of a little bit cool to say 1957. Look, I'm trying to find the positives. I am. But what I will tell you, the next story, Mirror Mirror on the Wall, I gave a 5 out of 10. That's actually pretty good. Like my favorite story of this, collection. The 5th Tales to Give You Goosebumps. 5 out of 10, who knew? So this one follows Bonnie, and she's very vain. Like she says, I'm the prettiest girl in the entire 6th grade. No, more than that. I am the prettiest 12-year-old in all of Mill City. So she's very full of herself. And whenever she sees herself in the mirror, like her reflection is starting to not do the things that she should be doing. And we've had this kind of story before on Goosebumps, but I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like, R.L. Stine likes to copy himself. That's a given. And so what was kind of scary was when the reflection kind of comes out of the mirror, I turned in time to see her head burst out the mirror. Another pop. Her shoulders sprang out. Pop, pop, pop. Her arms and legs stepped out of the glass. So like we have this awful popping sound as her reflection is coming out and then trying to drag her into the mirror, which is kind of scary. And then Bonnie like smashes the mirror and now there are like loads of like reflections of her and it's terrifying. I can see my reflection there and there and there and there. Dozens of reflections, they floated up from the mirror pieces like ghosts. And then her mother comes and she has to convince her mother that she is the real Bonnie. A little bit of stay out the basement there. And her mum does like realize, oh, she is the real Bonnie. So they get rid of all the fragments and then that kind of is the end of the story a little bit. Then Bonnie looks in the bathroom mirror to brush her hair and then she is actually pulled into the mirror because she can't get rid of her reflection. Her reflection is always going to be there, which is a terrifying thought. Doesn't matter what mirror you smash, you're still going to find your reflection somewhere. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. So her reflection does drag her in and she then becomes the reflection. So I love that. I do, I love that. 5 out of 10. That was pretty solid. And then the last story is called What's Cooking? And I gave this one a 2 out of 10. We couldn't stick the landing with this one. This one came across rather racist. I'm not gonna lie. So we have someone called Susan Chopman, and she was the cook, the cafeteria cook at this school in 1947. And they say her food was always gross. The kids nicknamed her Chop Suey because her Chinese surprise was the worst lunch of all. And then Susan dies. She falls on her cleaver or something, which is kind of grim. Kind of grisly. And so they closed that school back in like 1947. And then years later, they're reopening that school, but as like a summer school to deal with like overcrowding at the schools, which I find a kind of cool storyline. So we follow Robert and Diana, they are cousins, and they're going to the summer school. They say that if you say Chop Suey 3 times or stand on tiptoe, she'll come back from the dead. And so the first thing that Dave does is say that 3 times. And then a little bit later, the cafeteria woman, she reveals herself to be called Aunt Sue. So it seems like she is back from the dead, Aunt Sue Chopman. And so she just like serves them gross food. That's pretty much the story. And then she realizes that they're not eating her food, so she tries to kill them with a cleaver, which I do find terrifying, you know, like a ghost of a cafeteria cook trying to kill you with a cleaver. That is scary. The solution is very easy. Diana says, I saw in a movie where you say the name 3 times backwards, then it gets rid of them. So they do that. They say, Suey chop, Suey chop, Suey chop. Go away, and Sue goes. And then we have the twist at the end is when Dave goes home. He's talking to his mum, and the mum is saying, oh, we're going to order from a Chinese restaurant. You went here, so I ordered lau mein for you. And then she says, oh, you know, your dad got, he always orders the same thing every single time. Chop suey, chop suey, chop suey. And then there's a knock on the door. And like, oh, that's probably the delivery man. So that's how that story ends. I don't know. I didn't really feel quite right with that story. I like the summer school setting. That's like an abandoned summer school. And like the ghost of a cafeteria cook. That is a scary thought, but it was a bit painful to read, I'm not gonna lie. I don't get so much hate for saying that. I still get comments 3 years later just for saying I did like the fat phobia and some of the Goosebumps books in my first Goosebumps video. I still get comments to this day of people being like, oh, I love the fat phobia. Oh, you're such a snowflake. Fuck you. So I'll probably get hate comments for that. Anyway, this collection gets a 2.5 out of 10. So it is the lowest average of all of the anthologies so far. I'm hoping that the final Tales that Give You Goosebumps book will, fingers crossed, at least raise the average just a little bit. I have finished the Tales to Give You Goosebumps, which means I have finished quite possibly the last Goosebumps book I will be able to read for quite some time. And I'm happy. And you know what? There was a story in this that I gave a 7 out of 10, so that's great. There were a couple more 1 out of 10s. But, you know, I said as long as we get at least one story that I think is solid, I'm going to consider it a win. And so I do consider this one a win. And it actually gave me goosebumps. Like, one of the stories actually did give me goosebumps. So, yes, let's talk about the final Tales to Give You Goosebumps book. More and more and more Tales to Give You Goosebumps. So, the first story is called Don't Sit on the Gronk. And I gave this one a 2 out of 10. It was, again, one of those ones where I think R.L. Stine has this idea in his head of like what kids would consider scary, and maybe some kids do consider this scary, but like it kind of felt a little bit like, again, like the monster blood thing about like something getting bigger and bigger, and it's like, okay, like anything else you want to tell us? Oh, and this collection is all set around Christmas, which I loved. I loved the theme and the setting of this one. I thought it added so well to the atmosphere of this collection as a whole. In the first one, Don't Sit on the Gronk, we follow Brad, and it's Christmas morning, and he gets this like little thing that looks like, well, he says a koosh ball, but I have no idea what that is. I wonder if that's like an actual thing or something made up. And it's like kind of moving, and it looks like it's kind of breathing, and it is some kind of creature, and the parents don't even know where it came from. And Brad is like, oh, can I keep it? And the mom says, oh, I don't see why not. Like, we have this random alien creature in this package that nobody knows where it came from. It's like, oh, okay, we're gonna let that happen. I'm telling you, like, again, the parents in Goosebumps, they have no awareness. So it turns out to be called a Gronk, and there are instructions on how to take care of your Gronk. However, Brad just totally dismisses it. He doesn't want to read the instructions, and you know what? I couldn't blame him. How many times have we gotten something for Christmas, and the first thing we do is play with it before reading the instructions? I mean, I can't fault him for that. So he takes it outside, he dribbles the Gronk, which means it gets like a little bit bigger each time, and it starts to like grow and grow and grow. So again, it's just like one of those things, like the ivy story, when the ivy was just growing and growing. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna need a little bit more than that. Size does not matter when it comes to horror. And then they read the instructions, and it says, never take it outside or it will start to grow rapidly. Never use it as a ball because it will make it even more playful than it already is. And never sit on the Gronk. And we end that story with Brad sitting on the Gronk. And this is because then it will want to sit on you, and then it ends with splat. And I kind of like that ending because it kind of indicates that the Gronk sat on Brad and crushed him to death. And I do love a good story when the kids are in actual danger, you know? The next one is Nutcracker Nightmare, and I gave it a 4 out of 10 because I really do like the concept of it. It follows Samantha, and she is being forced with her family for Christmas to go to the ballet and like to watch like the Nutcracker. But we have Mrs. Boren, who is the person who like arranges it, like she gets them there, and they have to do it like for her. And Samantha says something about being bored to death, and Mrs. Boren says, well, it's time for you to learn some patience, Samantha. And then she slowly tapped the watch 3 times with her right pointer finger. So Mrs. Boren taps her watch. Samantha and her mum and Mrs. Boren, they go to watch the ballet. And as Samantha is watching it, everything is pretty much going in slow motion. Like, it feels to be dragging and dragging and dragging. The orchestra will start any minute. The dance will start any minute. They twirled around on stage as if in slow motion. 10 minutes later, my hands were getting so as I clapped. Like, people are clapping for 10 minutes. Like, everything seems to be majorly slowed down. And then she notices her mother's hair is going grey, and Samantha tries to run for the exit, but the exit keeps going further and further away, and she'd also grown out of the clothes that she was in, so she doesn't even know how long she's been there anymore. At the end, Mrs. Boren says the first act is almost over, the second act will start real soon. So it's like, we've got more time there. And again, like, it plays on that fear, that real fear as a kid. Like, when you're just being forced to go somewhere where you don't want to go, and you're being forced to, like, sit there and watch the entire thing, and you don't want to be there, and it's like, you're wishing it was over. But, like, this kind of plays to that a little bit. So I kind of like that. Again, like, I love when R.L. Stine plays to those real fears. Or is that, like, really a fear? Like, I don't think I've ever been scared of sitting there and watching, like, a ballet for a long period of time, or at least, like, longer than usual, which is kind of why I think it's kind of brilliant that R.L. Stine was like, oh, well, maybe you didn't think of this before. This is what would happen if you're not patient. Kind of thing, you know, like, I love that. So the next one is the Ice Vampire, which I gave a 4 out of 10. This one reminded me a little bit of that, like, gargoyle story, because there is a ice sculpture contest, and there's a random ice vampire that wins it. And the main character, Sam and Billy, they have an ice sculpture of a cobra, and they wanted to win, but the ice vampire wins. And then when they look for the ice vampire again, they see one of their friends has actually been frozen in his place, and this vampire has now, like, been unfrozen, and he wants heat. Like, he needs heat. He keeps coming up to them, and he's like, heat, heat. Like, he wants heat. Like, he wants your body heat, which can be a kind of scary visual. And whenever the vampire touches them, they can feel their heat leaving their body, almost as if he's turning them into an ice sculpture. So I quite like that. And this vampire kind of remind me of Olaf in Frozen. You know how he's like, oh, you know, I would love to be in the summer, I would love the heat and stuff, but obviously he would melt. Well, it kind of reminds me of that, because when the vampire gets like a sort of hairdryer, they're blasting the heat on him, and he's like, oh yeah, that's amazing. But the vampire melts, so that's how they get rid of him. But then the batteries die in this hairdryer. I'm like, a battery powered hairdryer? Really? It's not like just plugged in? Okay. And then when the battery dies, the ice sculpture of the cobra comes through, and it says, heat, give me your heat now. So, like, obviously, like, these ice sculptures are coming to life, and they're wanting body heat, and yeah, I mean, it was fine. It was a fine story, but it did remind me of that, like, gargoyle story where he turns them into stone. The next one I quite like the premise of, A Holly Jolly Holiday, which I gave a 5 out of 10. So this one follows Beth, and honestly, I don't know there's enough children's names under the sun for R.L. Stine to use, because we have so many of the same names over and over and over again. It is indicated that they are different people, but it's so hard to, like, keep track of these characters because a lot of them have the same name. I would love to see if there was, like, a list of all of the names R.L. Stine's ever used and how many times he used them, because I imagine Beth would be a name he's used like 20 times. So Beth, she has a sister called Jodie, and Jodie absolutely loves this film called A Holly Jolly Holiday, but Beth absolutely hates it. Beth loves wrestling, and one day Jodie gets a videotape of A Holly Jolly Holiday, and the person who sold her it was like, oh, this is the only copy I've ever known. So it seems to be like a film that isn't, like, produced on video. But anyway, Jodie plays the film, and then everyone in the household starts to turn into the main character in that film, which is like this really jolly, happy person called Susie Snowflake. So they're turning into Susie Snowflake, including Beth's mum, her sister, and her dad, and so she needs to, like, try and stop it. So what I kind of loved about it was that Beth, she was like, okay, well, if I'm gonna say the magic words, because she can't really remember the film all that well, she needs to remember some of the film to get the magic words to stop this from happening. So she needs to allow herself to be taken over a little bit by Susie Snowflake. If I let myself fall deeper under the spell, I could remember the words, and then I could get the tape. But there's kind of that danger of, oh, but what if she can't pull herself out? And I also kind of found it funny when Beth was like, out of my way, dearie, Jodie. And Jodie's like, is something wrong, dearie? Because that's something that Susie Snowflake says all the time. So it's kind of funny to see how Beth is, like, slowly changing. But she does end up getting the videotape from the VCR and destroys it, which makes everything back to normal. And then they get a tape at the end of WrestleMania, and the lady at the store said it was the only copy she's ever seen. So now it's indicated that they will all turn into wrestlers and, like, probably start fighting one another. Kind of funny. That is kind of funny. I would love to have seen that. But yeah, I just love the idea of a videotape and, like, a film starting to, like, change real life, because I think that's, like, a great commentary on things that we're inspired by in what we see in film and TV and stuff. So I kind of love that. I would have loved to have seen that as a longer story. I picked the worst time to film because my dad just rang, and I just got a message to say that my delivery, my grocery shop shopping is coming. So I'm like, I really did pick the worst time to film, didn't I? Anyway, so yeah, that was Holly Jolly Holiday. The next story is Why I Hate Jack Frost. I gave this one a 3 out of 10. It is one of those ones where it seemed like a never-ending cycle of dreams, but it kind of had real-world consequences. So I kind of liked when it has those real world implications, because it means that the whole thing wasn't a waste of time. So this one follows Jared, and he's just had to move to like a deserty place, and he hates it there because his winters aren't as snowy as they used to be. So he ends up finding this Jack Frost ornament. It was like a large ornament of like a house, an old-fashioned house with like Jack Frost in it. So he takes it home and he puts it over his bed. Then he starts getting dreams of Jack Frost and Jack Frost playing with him. And then when he wakes up, he's like really cold and he can't get warm. And then he keeps getting these dreams, and he seems to be like losing a little bit of himself every single time. Like he's getting more cold, he can't get warm, and he just like seems to be descending even further. And he tries to get rid of this ornament thing, but it keeps coming back. And then while he's in his dream, he kind of faints, and then he wakes up in Jack Frost's house in that ornament thing, and then Jack Frost and this elf are like, oh, like, this is your home. It's always been your home. The ornament must have given you nightmares. You live here with me. Now get dressed and we'll have a nice long snowball fight. And the ornament that's in the Jack Frost house is the house that he was living in with his mum. So it's kind of like, okay, so which is it? Like, is he from this world or is he from Jack Frost's world? And you know what I mean? It's like kind of giving some implications. So I gave it a 3 out of 10. Like, it wasn't amazing, but the hopelessness of his situation of like not being able to escape these like cycle of dreams and getting colder each time, that was quite good. Even though again, I don't like dreams sequences, but it meant something to the actual story. Like, it wasn't just a random thing that Orelsan just threw in to be scary. Oh, right. The next one is Marshmallow Surprise, and this one has every single Goosebumps trope going for it. So I gave it 2 out of 10. It wasn't quite a 1. So we have Marsha and her brothers, Ricky and Ronnie, and they are snowboarding, snow sledding, whatever you want to call it. And there is Mrs. Spooner, who lives at the bottom of a hill, and she's always like this mean lady. But she's only mean because these kids like terrorize her essentially. Like, I'm on Mrs. Spooner's side. But anyway, they do crash into her house, and Mrs. Spooner is like lovely. She's like, oh my god, are you guys okay? Like, I'm so sorry that you probably hurt yourself. Why don't you come in? I'll make us some nice hot cocoa and I'll make you my marshmallow surprise and it will be absolutely fine. So I was like, oh god, here we go. She's gonna get revenge, isn't she? And even the main character says, oh, she's gonna get revenge. So they go in anyway, and there aren't any marshmallows with the hot cocoa. And then, yeah, Mrs. Spooner says, I'm paying you back for all the neighborly things you've done for me. You hit baseball through my window last summer. You smashed your bicycle into my fence. You destroyed my mailbox today. Like, I'm on Mrs. Spooner's side. She's done nothing wrong. She's been terrorized by these little monsters. And you know what's funny as well? Is we get that good old Goosebumps trope where it turns out the main characters are the monsters all along. And so Mrs. Spooner is like, your bone's going to turn into marshmallows because that's the marshmallow surprise. You are the marshmallows. And then like this full moon has happened. Marsha, Ronnie and Ricky all turn into werewolves and they eat Mrs. Spooner. Oh, and yeah, like my delivery said. So I kind of like that little bit there, but it wasn't like the absolute best story. I just hate when the main character just turns out to be the villain all along. It's so lazy at this point. There's nothing new and original about it. Okay, shopping is away. Take 3. The next story is Monster on the Ice. I gave this one a 1 out of 10. It's genuinely, again, one of those ones where the main character gets random superpowers and they start to turn into a monster. Just boring, absolutely boring at this point. We follow Max and he gets some monster skates for Christmas, and the tagline is, be a monster on the ice. So obviously you know exactly where the story is going to go. They also have a German Shepherd called Stinker, and he has an annoying younger sister called Jessica who likes to like dress Stinker up. So Max is playing ice hockey with his friends and he's got his new skates on and stuff, and then he starts to like become quite monster-like. He starts to resent his friends and he sees them as the enemy. He slams into his friends, grabs Steve's coat and starts shaking him, and when I did it I growled again. So he is acting like a monster, but he starts to turn into a monster. His hands get covered in thick black fur and all he has to do is take them off. So he takes them off and he puts them in his closet, and then later on he goes in, he realizes that his little sisters put the skates on their German Shepherd and the German Shepherd is turned into a monster, and that is the end. Again, boring, not scary. We've had this story a million times before, but the next story is called The Double Dip Horror, and I quite enjoyed this story. I gave it a 7 out of 10, which is the highest rating for a short story in a good couple of collections now. I really enjoyed this one. This one we follow Rachel and Winona, and they are twins. They are twins, and they're going to this like ski lodge, which is called Ice Cream Cone Ski Lodge, which doesn't sound very scary. And they are going to be junior instructors to the kids there for like a class. So they're there on business, but they have an idea of alternating classes classes. So like one of them can hit the slopes while the other one teaches a class, and then at break time they'll switch. So nobody will know that they are twins. I don't know how that exactly is going to work, considering they would have both had to have applied and like got the room and stuff like that. But anyway, I digress. We're not going to try and analyze it too much. Winona, she goes to get some ice when they've all checked in, and someone pushes her into like the ice machine thing, which was quite scary. She does manage to escape, and she tells Rachel about it, but they don't really think too much of it. And then they go to the class that they need to teach. There is a random boy called Bobby who keeps saying, oh, give me private lesson, give me private lesson, and he's like being a little shit, and Rachel and Winona are like, oh my god, please just like leave us alone. And then they decide they are going to give Bobby a private lesson. I think they're going to try and get him back. Yeah, they're going to like surprise him, so like he doesn't know that they're twins, or like, they think that he doesn't know that they're twins. So one of them was going to like start at the top, and then the other one was going to be like further down, and they were going to like just scare him and, you know, all that stuff. So Bobby agrees to the private lesson, but like they're gonna go to the double dip. And Winona, she gets him there. She goes off, she leaves Bobby. She's like, I'm just gonna check everything's okay. So she goes off, she realizes that Rachel went to the wrong place, so they do come together. But then when they looked for Bobby, he's gone. They can't find Bobby. And so Rachel's like, okay, well, I'll stay here. You go and tell someone that Bobby's gone missing. So Winona goes down to the office and tells them, oh, Bobby, like, have you seen Bobby? Like, Bobby's gone missing. And Margot, who runs the place, says, we don't have a student named Bobby. And then Winona says, but you do, Bobby Judd. That's it, Judd. Margot's eyes grow wide. He hasn't been here for years. It has Bobby Judd, 1954. Bobby Judd skied here every winter. He came with his father and his twin brother, Ricky. Bobby smashed into a tree. He was killed instantly. So now Winona realizes, oh, I've just left my twin sister with a ghost. And Margot continues on, and remember, they don't know, apparently, that she has a twin because they've been, like, bamboozling everyone. So Margot says, so Bobby's ghost tries to lure a skier to the top of Double Dip, then he races the skier down, and some of the skiers don't make it. And Winona's like, oh my god, no, my sister, I mean, my friend, I left my friend up there. And Margot's like, oh, don't worry, your friend is safe. Bobby only goes after identical twins. And obviously, Winona and Rachel are identical twins. A lot's left up to your imagination, but I loved the kind of ghost story element of it. The bar is pretty low, okay? Me trying to explain that story was a little bit hard to do, because you just had to be there for it, okay? You had to be there for it. I really enjoyed it, and I loved the, you know, ski slope setting, the isolated setting of it, the snow, the danger of the snow, the different peaks. The next story is called Santa's Helpers, and I gave this one a 2 out of 10. I really didn't like the story, but I kind of liked the comeuppance that the characters get in it. So my petty little ass is like, okay, I'm not going to give it a 1 out of 10, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10, because I'm petty. We have Beth and Spencer, and they are awful to their sister Diana. They keep telling her, you're not our sister, you're not our sister, and you're not human, you came from Mars, not from Earth. And Diana's like begging to play with them, and she's like, please, you two always play together, you never play with me. And then they tell her, you're going to have a horrible Christmas, there is no Santa Claus, you've been a bad girl and stuff like that. They are awful, like absolutely awful, nasty bullies to poor Diana. And Spencer and Beth, and again, another Beth, Spencer and Beth, they have these matching clothes and they kind of look like elves. And then they end up getting kidnapped by some elves, and they are forced to work in Santa's workshop, and they have an audience for Santa Claus, and they're like, please, we're normal kids, we were kidnapped, like, we're not actually elves. So Santa's like, okay, well, prove it. You have one chance to prove yourself not elves. So Beth and Spencer take Santa and the elves, this is ridiculous to say out loud, take the elves to Diana. And they're like, Diana, please tell them that, you know, we're not elves, we're your sister. And Diana's like, but you always told me I'm not your sister. You said I'm definitely not from your family. Tell them who we are, Diana, please. Bye, Merry Christmas, Diana waved to me. Tell Santa I've been good. And that is Diana getting her comeuppance. And I'm so glad she did. I was rooting for Diana. Like, yes, get Beth and Spencer locked up in that workshop for the next 5 years, working around the clock. They deserve it. They are awful, awful people. So I liked that they got their comeuppance in the end. That was karma. Beautiful, beautiful karma. And then the final story, that will be reading of Goosebumps in a long ass time, I'll tell you. The final story is called Attack of the Christmas Present, and I gave it a 1 out of 10. I didn't like this one. We have Billy and Doug. They are visited by their uncle for Christmas, and their uncle always gives them the best gifts. However, this year, he doesn't seem to really give them very good gifts. He gives Billy a mask, like a weird looking mask, and he gives Doug this like little robot toy called Robot Tag. They're both kind of disappointed, so they decide to trade. And then Robot Tag keeps like standing up and like moving around, and so Billy keeps getting rather scared by it. He like puts it away, and then the next day he wakes up and it's there. It reminds me of like a million other Goosebumps books. But anyway, this story ends with Robot Tag, you know, getting closer to him, tap, tap, tap. It's kind of scary. Oh my god, he's come closer. I felt hands slap me on the shoulder. I opened my eyes. The robot grinned. Tag, he yelled, you're it. That is the story. Robot Tag just wanted to play tag. This tiny little robot. That isn't even scary. Wanted to play tag. That is the story. That is literally the entire story. 1 out of 10 for that one. It wasn't scary, wasn't even interesting, wasn't even entertaining. It was just plain bad. It was a filler story, as you will. It was a stock and filler story, as you will. But you know, I guess if you're looking for some like little spooky Christmassy, spooky is like a very strong word. When again, I only really thought one of them was like genuinely spooky. But if you want like a holiday scares kind of read, this is the one for you. So with all of that in mind, the final Tales to Give You Goosebumps book average is a 3.1 out of 10. So it was actually better than the previous 2 volumes in overall average. So yeah, those were the 6 Tales to Give You Goosebumps books, and I did want to do the average for these stories and put it against like the main series of Goosebumps and the averages that I gave those books. And again, if you haven't seen my other Goosebumps videos, do check them out. I rate every single story out of 10, and so my series averages are on the screen now, or they should be, and Tales to Give You Goosebumps got an average of 3.57, which is actually higher than all of Slappy World and all of Most Wanted. Like, that's not too bad, I guess, for them, especially being like really short stories, and I rated the books based on the short stories alone. And it actually beat out the last 2 main Goosebumps series that I've read, and they were like full-length novels. Like, we're talking like 20 books, 15 to 20 books in those series. So actually, Tales to Give You Goosebumps did pretty well considering. It was still so amazing to go back in time and read Goosebumps stories that were written in the 90s. They always have this beautiful, special, nostalgic place in my heart. Even when I'm giving them like a 1 out of 10. Again, I still absolutely love and adore Goosebumps with all of my heart. I love and adore R.L. Stine with all my heart as well. I let him go. I did. I let R.L. Stine go. I thought, you know what, you've been through enough. I do still want you to retire, but you've been through enough. I would love to do the Give Yourself Goosebumps books because I think that's the last spin-off series that I need to like really do, but I don't think that will ever happen considering how expensive those books are. I don't really own very many of them, so I would have to collect pretty much all of them, and I'm not about to spend over £1,000 on these books. Absolutely not. So I'll still keep an eye out, say if like a reasonable price comes out that I can, you know, afford, and maybe get those Give Yourself Goosebumps books, because I do think they will be so much fun to read. I have ideas for that video as well if it does go ahead, but unfortunately it's looking very unlikely at the minute. So for now, this may be my final full-length Goosebumps reading vlog in a long time. Now I will be making other little Goosebumps videos every now and then. Like, I do want to do like my favourite Goosebumps stories since I've read all of the main series and now some of the spin-off books. I want to do like a list of like, oh, I've read over 150 Goosebumps books, these are the ones you should read kind of like thing. Like, there are still some really fun Goosebumps videos that I can do in the future, so do keep an eye out for that. This will not be the very end of Goosebumps forever, but it is the end of the Goosebumps reading vlogs, for better or worse. So that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave this video a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave all your comments down below. Let me know if you've read the Tales to Give You Goosebumps books. Have you got a favourite story from these collections? Let me know everything down below, and just tell me how great the Haunted House game story is. Definitely the best one of the bunch, and I might do a ranking of the stories, my favourite stories overall from this collections. Something like that, I don't know, keep an eye out. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons for support my channel. If you'd like to join my Patreon, then the link is in the description box. But yeah, I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye.